The Last Watch. Marcus Chen had spent 12 years as a forest ranger, but nothing in his experience prepared him for what awaited him at Uinta National Park. When the transfer letter arrived, he saw it as a blessing, a fresh start after the divorce, a chance to escape the memories that haunted his small cabin in Montana. The Park Service needed an experienced ranger to replace someone who'd retired suddenly. And Marcus, with his spotless record and love for isolation, was the perfect candidate. He didn't question why they'd offered him a 40% pay raise. He didn't ask why the previous ranger had left all his belongings behind. He packed his truck, said goodbye to his ex-wife's voice on his answering machine, and drove west toward the Uinta Mountains of northeastern Utah. The park headquarters sat at 8,000 feet elevation, nestled in a valley that seemed to swallow sunlight whole. Even in late August, when Marcus arrived, a permanent chill clung to the air. His supervisor, a heavy-set man named Wendell Blackfish who'd worked the park for 30 years, met him at the ranger station with a handshake that felt like crushed gravel. "You're taking the northwest sector," Wendell said, not bothering with welcome pleasantries. 80 square miles. You'll check the trails, monitor wildlife, assist any hikers stupid enough to wander off the marked paths. He paused, studying Marcus with dark eyes that seemed to look straight through him. "And you'll do the night watch." "Night watch?" Marcus asked. "I thought this sector only had day patrols." Wendell's jaw tightened. "It does now. We've had incidents, wildlife getting aggressive, hikers reporting strange sounds, the usual shit that brings in the crazies. Your job is to keep people calm and keep them out of the restricted areas." "What restricted areas?" Wendell pulled out a topographical map, his finger tracing a ridge line in the northwest corner. "Above 9,500 feet, everything's off-limits. Park Service closed it 3 years ago. Unstable terrain, rock slides, dangerous fauna. You see anyone heading up there, you stop them. By force if necessary." Marcus nodded, though something in Wendell's tone made his skin prickle. "What's really up there?" For just a moment, something flickered in Wendell's expression. Fear, maybe, or guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by the blank professionalism of a man who'd spent decades following orders he didn't understand. "Nothing you need to worry about," Wendell said. "Just stay below the tree line, keep your radio on channel 7 and don't," he stopped himself. "Don't what?" "Don't go looking for answers to questions nobody asked." Wendell turned away. "Your cabin's 5 miles north. Gas, solar, satellite phone. You report in every 6 hours. Miss 2 check-ins and we send a team. Miss 3 and they don't send anyone at all." Marcus found the cabin just as Wendell described. Small, weather-beaten, but surprisingly well-maintained. Solar panels gleamed on the roof. A wood stove sat ready with split pine stacked on the porch. Inside, he found a simple kitchen, a narrow bed, and shelves lined with manuals, maps, and bound logs from previous rangers. The last entry caught his attention. The handwriting deteriorated across the pages, starting with crisp observations about elk migration and ending with mad scribbles he couldn't decipher. The final page contained only one sentence, written in what looked like brown paint. "It wears their faces now." Marcus closed the logbook and told himself the stain was coffee or mud or anything but what his instincts suggested. He unpacked his gear, set up his radio, and tried to sleep. That night he dreamed of running, not through the forest but somehow above it, racing across the treetops with impossible speed. In the dream, he was hunting something that screamed in a voice too human to be any animal. He woke at dawn with his heart hammering and the taste of copper in his mouth. His first week passed uneventfully. He cleared fallen branches from trails, updated signage, and helped a family of tourists change a flat tire on their RV. He saw elk, deer, and once from a distance what might have been a mountain lion. Nothing unusual, nothing frightening. Then came the 8th night. Marcus had fallen into a routine. Sunset patrol, radio check-in, dinner by lamplight reading the ranger logs from years past. They were mundane documents mostly, weather observations, trail conditions, lists of supplies needed. But occasionally he'd find something strange. A mention of the old prayer circles near a place called Medicine Lake. A note about avoiding certain rock formations during the new moon. A warning, underlined 3 times. When you hear your name called from the darkness, do not answer. He'd laughed at that one, written it off as a joke or superstition or the product of too many lonely nights in the wilderness. He wasn't laughing at 2:47 a.m. when his radio crackled to life. Marcus. Static, then silence. He sat up in bed, his hand frozen over the radio. Only dispatch had his frequency, and they never called outside of scheduled check-ins unless it was an emergency. Marcus Chen. The voice sounded like Wendell, but wrong somehow, stretched, distorted, as if speaking through a mouth that had never learned to form human words. "This is Ranger Chen," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Identify yourself." Silence stretched for 20 seconds, 30. He was about to sign off when the voice returned, closer now, as if whispering directly into his ear. "I see you through the window." Marcus lunged for the light switch, flooding the cabin with harsh yellow illumination. The windows showed only darkness, his own reflection staring back at him with wide, frightened eyes. He grabbed his flashlight and swept it across the clearing. Nothing, no tracks, no shadows moving between the trees. He checked the radio log. The transmission had come from his own frequency, Channel 7, which only his handset could access. No one else should have been able to broadcast on that channel. No one else should have known his name. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the corner, his back to the wall, his service weapon heavy in his lap, watching the windows until dawn turned the sky the color of old bruises. 3 days later, Marcus found the first body. He was checking the eastern perimeter, following a dry creek bed that wound through stands of aspen and pine, when he caught the smell, sweet and coppery, unmistakable to anyone who'd spent time in the wilderness. Death had its own perfume, and it grew stronger with every step he took. The woman lay face down in the creek bed, her hiking gear still pristine, her dark hair fanned across the rocks like seaweed. From a distance, she might have been sleeping. Up close, Marcus saw what had killed her. Her back had been opened from neck to waist, the flesh peeled away with surgical precision. The spine gleamed white in the morning sun, and her ribs, her ribs had been spread outward, cracked and arranged like wings preparing for flight. No predator he knew made kills like this. No animal arranged its prey in ritual patterns. And her spine. Something was wrong with it. Even in his horror, Marcus could see that the vertebrae seemed too numerous, too elongated, as if the bones had been stretched and then broken and then stretched again. He radioed it in. Wendell's voice came back immediately, flat and controlled. "Secure the scene. Don't touch anything. I'm sending a team from Vernal." "Wendell, this wasn't an animal. This was." "Don't," the word cracked like a whip. "Don't say anything over an open channel. Mark the location and wait for the team. And Marcus," a pause, "when they get there, tell them you didn't touch the body. Tell them you didn't look too closely. Do you understand?" He understood. He understood that Wendell knew what he'd find out here. He understood that this wasn't the first time this had happened. The team arrived 4 hours later, 4 men in black jackets with no insignia, driving an unmarked SUV. They photographed the body, bagged it with practiced efficiency, and told Marcus to forget what he'd seen. "Bear attack," the leader said, a tall man with pale eyes and no name tag. "Rare, but it happens. We'll handle the paperwork." "That wasn't a bear." "Everything is a bear," the man said softly, "until it's something worse. And when it's something worse, the best thing you can do is pretend you never saw it. Go back to your cabin, Ranger Chen. Stick to the trails, do your job, And if you see anything unusual," he smiled, showing teeth that seemed too sharp, "try not to see it." They took the body and drove away, leaving Marcus alone with the blood-stained rocks and the certainty that he was being lied to about something fundamental, something that mattered more than anything else in his life. Marcus began to dig. What he found in the park archives, access through an old terminal in the basement of the headquarters building, made his blood run cold. The Northwest sector hadn't always been restricted. 15 years ago, it had been prime hiking territory, home to a popular trail system called the Skyline Loop. Then came the disappearances. 1978, a family of 4 vanished from their campsite. Search teams found their tent shredded, their belongings scattered, and 4 piles of teeth arranged in a circle around their campfire. 1983, 6 teenage hikers missing, found 3 weeks later walking back toward civilization in a single-file line. They wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. They died one by one over the following month, their bodies found with expressions of perfect terror frozen on their faces. 1992, an entire geological survey team, 11 trained professionals with GPS and satellite communication. They stopped transmitting at 3:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. When rescuers reached their last known position, they found the equipment, cameras, computers, sample cases, arranged in a perfect spiral pattern on the ground. No bodies, no blood, just 11 sleeping bags, each containing a pile of stones shaped vaguely like a human form. Marcus found accounts going back further, too. Newspaper clippings from the 1930s about night walkers in the mountains. Army records from the 1880s detailing a cavalry expedition that lost 30 men to enemy combatants in a region where no hostile tribes were known to operate. The same pattern over and over. Disappearances, impossible remains, survivors who refused to speak or spoke only in riddles. The Ute people indigenous to this region had a name for it. Marcus found references in anthropological journals. Ye Naldlushea, the Skinwalker, a witch who'd broken tribal taboo, gained unnatural powers and used them to hunt humans. They could take any form, animal, human, something between. They were drawn to desecration, to places where the natural order had been violated. And they couldn't enter dwellings uninvited. That was the rule. They could mimic voices, mimic faces, mimic everything about the people they killed, but they couldn't cross a threshold without permission. Marcus thought of the radio transmission, "I see you through the window." He thought of Wendell's warning, "Don't go looking for answers to questions nobody asked." He closed the terminal and went back to his cabin. That night, he nailed boards across every window and barricaded the door. He slept with his gun in his hand and his radio turned off. At 3:00 a.m., something scratched at the boards, long, rhythmic scratches that sounded almost like words. He didn't sleep again. The weather turned. August heat gave way to September chill, and the first snows came early, dusting the high peaks with white that never seemed to melt. Marcus continued his patrols, but he stayed below 8,500 feet now, avoiding the restricted zone with the superstitious fear of a man walking past a graveyard. He started seeing things. A deer on the trail ahead, watching him with eyes that seemed too knowing. A hawk that followed his truck for miles, never flapping its wings, just riding the thermals in perfect synchronization with his speed. A figure in the tree line during his evening patrol, tall, impossibly thin, watching him with what might have been binoculars or might have been something else entirely. He reported none of it. The black-suited men had taught him that much. Everything was normal until it wasn't, and when it wasn't, silence was the only safe option. Then came the night he met himself. He'd been driving the access road near Medicine Lake, his headlights cutting through fog that seemed to gather in the low areas, when he saw the reflection in his rearview mirror, a truck behind him, identical to his own, following at a distance of exactly 50 yards. He sped up. The truck sped up. He slowed down. The truck slowed down. Marcus pulled over, his heart hammering against his ribs. The other truck pulled over too, 50 yards back, its lights still on, its engine still running. Through the fog, he could see a figure in the driver's seat, a figure that looked like him. The figure raised its hand in a wave. Marcus floored the accelerator and didn't stop until he reached his cabin. He sat in the dark for hours, listening to the silence, waiting for the scratch of claws or the whisper of his name. It came at dawn. He was preparing coffee, hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the kettle when he heard footsteps on his porch. Heavy boots, the kind he wore himself. Then a knock, 3 sharp raps, the same pattern he used when approaching backcountry cabins. Ranger Chen, his own voice. His exact voice down to the slight rasp from years of cigarette smoking. "It's Wendell. I need to talk to you about the restricted zone." Marcus didn't answer. He stood frozen, the kettle forgotten, steam rising around his face like mist. "I know you're in there, Marcus. I saw your truck. Let me in. We need to talk about what you found in the archives." He couldn't. Even knowing what waited outside, some part of him still responded to the sound of his own voice, still wanted to believe that help had arrived, that someone was finally telling him the truth. "Marcus, please, it's getting cold out here. Let me in. I just need to warm up for a minute." The kettle screamed. Marcus grabbed it, threw the boiling water against the door, heard a hiss and a sound like tearing fabric. Then silence. He waited until noon before opening the door. On the porch, he found his own footprints, boots identical to his, the same worn-down heel on the left side, and something else. A trail of wet, steaming liquid that led from his door to the tree line where it disappeared into the pines. The liquid was black, viscous, and smelled of copper and rot. Wendell came the next day, the real Wendell, driving his ancient Forest Service truck with the cracked windshield and the coffee stains on the seat. He found Marcus on the porch, cleaning his shotgun for the 4th time that morning, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. "You need to get out of here," Wendell said. "No preamble, no lies. Transfer request came through from headquarters, medical discharge, stress-related." "What is it, Wendell? What's really up there?" Wendell sat down on the steps, his bulk making the wood creak. He looked old suddenly, older than his 60 years, older than the mountains themselves. "You know what it is. You've read the stories, you've seen the signs. I need to hear you say it." "It's old," Wendell whispered. "Older than the Ute, older than the Fremont people who came before them. Maybe older than humans. It lives in the high places, the thin places where the world doesn't fit together right. And it's hungry." "The Skinwalker." "That's what the Ute called it, yeah. But that's just a name. Names give you the illusion of understanding, of control. What it really is," he shook his head. "I don't know. I've worked this park for 30 years and I still don't know. I just know it kills and it wears the dead like clothes and it can almost be a person when it wants to be." Marcus felt ice in his chest. The woman in the creek, the hiker. "It learns from them, takes their memories, their voices, their faces. It gets better every time. Smarter, more human." "And the restricted zone. That's where it lives, that's where it hunts. We keep people out and sometimes that's enough." "Sometimes." Wendell stood up, his knees popping. "It's been here longer than the Park Service, longer than the state, longer than the country. It was here when the first humans crossed the land bridge, and it'll be here when the last humans die. All we can do is feed it and hope it stays in its territory." "Feed it." "The transfers, Marcus, the transfers that aren't really transfers, the rangers who retire suddenly, the hikers who ignore the warnings." Wendell wouldn't meet his eyes. "Sacrifices, maybe, or offerings, I don't know the right word. I just know that every few years someone has to go up there and they don't come back and then it's quiet for a while." Marcus thought of the previous ranger, the one who'd left all his belongings behind. The one whose final log entry warned of something wearing faces. "You knew," he said quietly. "You knew when you hired me. I needed someone experienced, someone who could last long enough to be useful, someone." He finally looked at Marcus, and there were tears in his eyes. Someone without family, without attachments, someone who wouldn't be missed too much. "I'm the offering." "You're the price," Wendell corrected. "The price of keeping it contained, the price of protecting everyone else. I'm sorry, Marcus, I truly am, but you have until the new moon. That's 3 days after that." "After that what?" "After that," Wendell said, walking to his truck, "you'll either go up the mountain willingly, or it'll come down and take what it wants. And if it comes down, it won't stop with you." Marcus had 3 days. He spent the first day gathering supplies. Salt from the kitchen, iron nails from the shed, silver coins he'd kept as lucky charms from his grandfather. He didn't know if any of it would work. The folklore was inconsistent, and Wendell's information was clearly incomplete, but he had to try. The second day, he hiked to the nearest Ute reservation, 40 miles south, and found an elder named Joseph who agreed to speak with him after Marcus explained what he'd seen. They sat in Joseph's trailer, drinking bitter coffee while the old man rolled cigarettes with trembling hands. "You can't kill it," Joseph said. "No one kills something that old, something that feeds on death itself, but you can hurt it. You can drive it back." "How?" "It wears faces, but it forgets what it takes. Every form it steals, it loses a piece of what it was before. That's why it hungers. It's trying to remember itself." "What does that mean for me?" Joseph reached under his chair and pulled out a leather pouch. Inside were fragments of bone, human bone, old and yellowed. "These came from my great-grandmother. She fought a Skinwalker in 1903, drove it into a fire and made it burn. Cost her an eye and 3 fingers, but she lived." "What do I do with them?" "You make it remember. You force it to hold every face at once, every voice, every life it's stolen. You overload it with memory until it can't hold its shape anymore. Then you burn the bones it leaves behind." "And if that doesn't work?" Joseph was quiet for a long time. Outside, the afternoon sun was dying, painting the reservation in shades of gold and blood. "Then you run," he said finally. "And you keep running, and you never stop, because it will follow you forever. It will wear your wife's face and your children's faces and the faces of everyone you've ever loved. It will become them so completely that you'll forget they were ever anything else. And eventually, you'll open the door. Eventually, you'll invite it in." He pressed the pouch into Marcus's hands. "But first, you have to survive the night. That's the hard part." Marcus returned to his cabin as darkness fell on the second day. He'd fortified the windows with boards and nails, sprinkled salt across every threshold, and hung the bone fragments around his neck. He sat in the center of the single room, his shotgun in his lap, and waited. The scratching started at midnight. It wasn't at the windows this time. It came from above, from the roof, the sound of claws dragging across shingles, slow and deliberate, like something taking its time, savoring the anticipation. "Marcus." His mother's voice. She died 10 years ago, cancer, gone peacefully in a hospice in Oregon. He'd held her hand at the end. Now that voice came from the roof, soft and loving. "Marcus, baby, let me in. It's cold out here." He bit his lip until he tasted blood. The bone fragments against his chest grew warm, then hot, burning through his shirt. "Marcus, please, I'm scared. There are monsters in the dark." The scratching moved to the chimney. He heard it descending, claws finding purchase on the brick lining, something heavy and wrong squeezing through a space too narrow for any natural creature. The fire he'd built in the stove was still burning low. He heard a hiss as the thing reached the flames, then a sound like laughter. "Clever boy, you know the old stories, but fire doesn't stop me anymore. I've burned so many times, Marcus. I've learned to love the heat." The stove door burst open. Something emerged, not his mother, not quite, but something wearing her memory like a mask. It was tall, too tall for the cabin, its joints bending wrong, its skin seeming to shift and flow like water in a stream. For just a moment it had her face, her kind eyes, her gentle smile. Then that melted away and he was looking at himself. "You're going to die tonight," his own voice said. "But you'll live forever in me. I'll wear you better than anyone else. I'll hike your trails and man your radio and love your ex-wife's memory until she seems like a stranger. You'll be me and I'll be you, and no one will ever know the difference." Marcus raised his shotgun. "Get out of my cabin. You have to invite me, you know that. I've been trying for weeks. Every knock, every call, every shadow at your window. I need you to say the words." "I'll never say them." "Won't you?" The thing that wore his face smiled, and that smile was worse than any snarl. "Your mother said them in the end, your father too. Everyone says them eventually. The words are, 'Please come in.' Just 4 little words, Marcus. Say them and the pain stops. Say them and you become eternal. Say them and—" Marcus pulled the trigger. The shotgun blast took the thing in the chest, not killing it. He'd known it wouldn't kill it, but knocking it back through the open stove into the fire. He lunged forward, slamming the stove door, wedging it shut with a chair. The cabin shook as the thing screamed. The walls groaned, the windows cracked, the roof shingles ripped away one by one. But the chair held. The fire burned. And slowly, slowly, the screaming faded. At dawn, Marcus opened the stove. Inside were bones. Not human bones exactly, but something that had been shaped like a human, twisted and elongated, with too many joints and too few fingers, and a skull that seemed to grin even in death. The bones smelled of copper and rot and something else, something ancient and hungry. He gathered them carefully, wrapped them in the leather pouch Joseph had given him, and walked out into the morning light. Marcus climbed alone. He left his truck at the base of the restricted zone, marked the trail with cairns that he'd never follow back down, and began the ascent. The Ute elder had been clear. The Skinwalker he'd killed was just one manifestation, one vessel that the true thing had been wearing. To end it, really end it if such a thing were possible, he had to find the source. The place where it lived when it wasn't wearing faces. The climb took 8 hours. The air grew thin, the trees gave way to rock, and the temperature dropped until his breath crystallized before his face. He passed places where the stone seemed wrong, twisted, spiraled, almost organic, and places where the snow was black instead of white. At 9,800 feet, he found the cave. It wasn't marked on any map, though the surveys had supposedly covered this area a dozen times. The entrance was low and wide, barely visible until you were standing before it, and the rock around it was stained dark with something that might have been mineral deposits or might have been dried blood. Marcus didn't want to enter. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to run, to take the bones he'd collected and bury them somewhere deep, and hope the thing never found him. But he'd seen what it did to people. He'd seen the ritual patterns, the arranged remains, the absolute certainty that somewhere in this park, something ancient and patient was feeding on human fear. He went inside. The cave extended further than it should have, slanting downward into the mountain's heart. The air grew warmer as he descended, and the walls began to change. No longer stone, but something softer, something that pulsed with a rhythm like a heartbeat. He was walking through a throat, he realized, through something's digestive system. The chamber opened suddenly, vast and circular, and Marcus saw the truth of the Skinwalker. It wasn't one creature. It was thousands, thousands of faces stacked like cordwood, thousands of bodies arranged in spirals, thousands of voices whispering from dead mouths. The thing at the center was barely visible, hidden behind layers of stolen humanity, but he could feel it watching him, feel it hungering. "Welcome home," the voices said, speaking in unison from 1,000 dead throats. "We've been waiting for you." Marcus opened Joseph's pouch and poured the bones onto the cavern floor. "I know what you are," he said, his voice steady despite his terror. "I know what you take, and I'm here to make you give it back." The thing laughed with 10,000 mouths. "Little Ranger," it said. "Little human, you think you can hurt me. I've worn 1,000,000 faces. I've consumed 1,000,000 lives. You are nothing but food. You are nothing but—" Marcus spoke the words Joseph had taught him. Ancient words, Ute words, older than the thing itself. Words that meant remember and return and release. The faces began to scream. Not in pain, but in remembering. Each stolen life suddenly aware of itself, suddenly demanding to be free. The spiral patterns broke, the stacked bodies collapsed, and the thing at the center, formless, endless, older than time, began to collapse in on itself. "No," it whispered, and that whisper was still loud enough to shake the mountain. "Not again. Not yet. I was so close. I was almost." Marcus pulled the lighter from his pocket, his grandfather's Zippo, carried through wars and peace, through life and now, finally, through death. He flicked it open, struck the wheel, and threw it into the pile of bones. They caught immediately, burning with a fire that wasn't natural, burning with the memory of every life they'd touched. The thing screamed, and the mountain screamed with it, and Marcus ran. He didn't stop running until he reached his truck, 6 hours later, his lungs burning, his legs numb. Behind him, the mountain was smoking, the peak glowing with internal fire. The restricted zone was burning from the inside out. He watched from the valley as the fire spread, consuming the high passes, the ridges, the twisted rock formations that had been wrong for millennia. The thing was burning. The thing was dying. Maybe not forever, nothing truly dies forever. But for now, for this generation, for this moment, it was over. 6 months later, a new ranger arrived at Uinta National Park. Young guy, fresh out of training, eager to make a difference. The park headquarters had been rebuilt after the fire, the restricted zone officially reopened for hiking, and the old stories had begun to fade into legend. Wendell Blackfish met the kid at the ranger station, same as he'd met Marcus, same as he'd met 30 others over the years. He gave the standard briefing, assigned the Northwest sector, mentioned the night watch. "Isn't that unusual?" the kid asked. "Night patrols in a remote sector." "We've had wildlife issues," Wendell said, and his voice didn't shake at all anymore. "Aggressive fauna, nothing to worry about." He didn't mention Marcus Chen. Didn't mention the fire, or the bodies, or the thing that had worn so many faces. He didn't mention that the new moon was coming in 3 days, or that someone always had to stay in the cabin, or that sometimes the wildlife was more than just wildlife. The kid drove off to his new posting, full of enthusiasm and hope, and Wendell watched him go with eyes that had seen too much. That night the radio crackled. "Wendell." His own voice, his exact voice down to the gravel in his throat. "It's cold out here, let me in." Wendell sat in the darkness of the ranger station, his service pistol in his lap, and didn't answer. He knew better than to answer. He'd learned that much after 30 years. But the kid didn't know. The kid was alone in a cabin 5 miles north, listening to the scratching at his window, wondering if he should open the door. Somewhere in the mountains, something that had almost died was laughing with 1,000 mouths, wearing 1,000 faces, waiting for the invitation it knew would come. The forest was dark and deep and patient. And the forest always won in the end. The Valley of Whispers. November 17, 2025. I don't sleep anymore. Not really. Sometimes I manage an hour or two before the dreams come, the ones where I'm back there in that valley, where the trees grew so thick that the sun never touched the ground, where the mist curled between ferns like living smoke, where I watched 3 of my closest friends die screaming. The doctors say I have PTSD, severe trauma. I should take the pills they prescribe, But the pills don't stop the truth, and the truth is that what happened up there wasn't just trauma. It was something ancient and hungry that found us in the dark. They say it takes a year to write these things, to process, to try to make sense of the senseless, but nothing will ever make sense of what happened in the Quinault rainforest, in that forgotten valley that no longer appears on any map. Not on the new ones anyway. The old map that brought us there, the one Jake found folded in a cigar box at a garage sale in Port Angels, that map showed a logging road and a blue line marked Cedar Creek Trail that ate through the park's most remote interior. The guy selling it called it an antique, called it a treasure, said his grandfather had marked it up back in the 1920s before anyone called this place a national park. I still have the map. I keep it in a safe deposit box now, in a bank 3 towns over from where I live. The paper is yellowed and fragile, smelling of cedar and rot, and something else I couldn't identify then but recognize now, the copper tang of old blood. The ink markings are faded but precise. Coordinates, warnings in cursive I can barely read, and one word circled in the center of the blank space between 2 unnamed mountains. Taboo, it said, underlined 3 times, with an X across it like a warning. We should have obeyed it. The 5 of us had been planning this trip for months. Jake Morrison was the one who found the map, Jake with his obsession for all things vintage and forgotten. He was a photographer by trade, the kind of guy who'd spend 3 days waiting for the perfect light on a single waterfall. He'd been dating Sarah Chen for almost 2 years, and those 2 were attached at the hip. Sarah was quiet, analytical, a software engineer who approached everything with methodical precision. They balanced each other well. Then there was Marcus Webb. I'd known Marcus since college. He was loud and brash and fearless, an ex-Marine who worked as a firefighter in Tacoma. He'd survived tour in Fallujah and thought nothing could touch him. His wife had left him 6 months before our trip, and he was running from the silence of his empty apartment, desperate for distraction. The 5th member of our doomed party was David Okafor. David was the new guy, Sarah's co-worker, who transferred from Arizona 2 months prior. He was Navajo on his mother's side, soft-spoken and observant, carrying himself with a watchful stillness that made people trust him instantly. He said he'd grown up in Flagstaff, had spent time on the reservation with his grandmother learning the old ways before he'd gone to college. He knew the woods, knew how to read the land. We wanted him along because he seemed steady, because he seemed like the kind of person who could handle himself anywhere. I was the organizer, the one who'd proposed this trip, Mia Tours. I was the glue that held our friend group together, the one who remembered birthdays and planned reunions. I'm the one writing this now because I'm the one who survived, because I carry the weight of 4 dead friends, and because I need someone to know what really happened in those woods before I do something I can't take back. The drive to Olympic National Park from Tacoma took about 3 hours. We left on a Friday morning in early October when the autumn rains hadn't yet settled in but the tourist crowds had thinned to almost nothing. We took 2 vehicles, Jake's Jeep Wrangler pulling a small trailer with our gear and Marcus's truck with the kayaks strapped on top. David rode with Marcus. Sarah rode with Jake. I drove my own Subaru, packed with supplies, following the route Jake had mapped out. The plan was simple. We'd hike into the backcountry, spending 5 days following the old Cedar Creek Trail to a place called Prophet's Ridge, supposedly named for some hermit who'd lived there in the 1930s. The area wasn't marked on any modern NPS maps. It was outside the designated wilderness areas, technically accessible but rarely visited. That's what appealed to Jake. The isolation. The prospect of photographing a part of the park that hadn't been documented in decades. We camped the first night at the Graves Creek Ranger Station, where an elderly volunteer named Henderson checked our permits. He was friendly enough at first, asking about our destination, but when Jake mentioned the Cedar Creek Trail, the old man's face went pale. "That's not on the official maps anymore," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Hasn't been since the 60s. Too dangerous. Flash floods, unstable slopes, no rescue access if something goes wrong. "We've got satellite communicators," Marcus said, patting his chest pocket. "And I'm trained in backcountry rescue. We know what we're doing." Henderson looked like he wanted to say more. His eyes moved between the five of us, lingering longest on David. "You from around here?" he asked. David shook his head. "Arizona originally." "Ah," Henderson's face relaxed slightly, though his eyes remained troubled. "Well, be careful out there. Stick to the trail. Don't go wandering. These woods—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "These woods are old, son. Older than the park. Older than the country. They remember things we'd rather forget." We laughed about it later in the parking lot. Mocked his cryptic warnings. Called him a crazy old man who'd spent too much time alone. But I noticed David didn't laugh. He stood apart from us, staring into the dark forest pressing against the edge of the gravel lot, his expression unreadable. "You okay, man?" I asked him. He turned slowly, like waking from a trance. "Yeah, just thinking about what he said." "Ignore it," Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Old-timers love their ghost stories." David didn't respond, just shouldered his pack and walked toward his truck. The trailhead was 12 miles down a logging road that had been abandoned so long it had nearly returned to nature. We found it by matching landmarks from Jake's old map to the terrain: an unusual rock formation, a dried-up creek bed, the remnants of a wooden bridge. The old road was overgrown with salmonberry and devil's club, barely passable even with high-clearance vehicles. We parked where the road ended at a collapsed culvert, under a canopy of Douglas fir and western red cedar so thick it felt like dusk even at noon. The air smelled of decaying leaves and moss, that particular sweetrot perfume of old-growth temperate rainforest. Everything dripped. Everything grew. Ferns as tall as my waist carpeted the ground in endless waves of green. Jake consulted his map, orienting himself by compass. "Trail should be about 50 yards ahead," he said. "There's supposed to be a blazed tree marking the start." We found it, a massive cedar with a diamond-shaped blaze cut into its bark, the cut so old it had healed over completely, leaving only a raised scar. Someone had added to it in more recent years, a crude arrow painted in what looked like rust-colored pigment, pointing deeper into the forest. "Weird," Sarah said, taking a photo with her phone. "Wonder who maintains this." "Hunters, probably," Marcus suggested. "Lots of elk in these old valleys." We shouldered our packs and started hiking. The trail, such as it was, followed the route of an old fire access road, overgrown but still passable. For the first few miles we made good time, talking and laughing, enjoying the novelty of being somewhere no one else had visited in years. Jake was ecstatic, taking photos of everything. The way the light filtered through the canopy, the massive nurse logs supporting new growth, a moss-covered stone marker with numbers too worn to read. But then the trail changed. It happened gradually, so subtly that none of us noticed right away. The forest became older, more pristine. The undergrowth thinned as the canopy grew denser, blocking out so much light that I found myself squinting even in midday. The trees were enormous, cedars with diameters wider than cars, firs towering 200 feet into the gray sky. They had been here for 1,000 years, maybe longer. They had witnessed things. Jake stopped to check his map, frowning. "This doesn't match," he said. "The elevation markers are wrong. We're lower than we should be." "The map's from the 1920s, Sarah reminded him. "Surveys weren't as accurate back then." "Yeah, but," he pointed to a symbol on the map, "there's supposed to be a creek crossing here, a major one, but look." There was no creek. The ground was dry, carpeted with needles sloping gently downward. When I listened, though, I thought I could hear something, distant, like water rushing underground or maybe just the wind in the high branches. "Let's keep going," Marcus said. "We're burning daylight and I want to reach camp before nightfall." We kept walking. The trail, if it could still be called that, became harder to follow. The blazes were fewer and farther between, and several times we had to backtrack when we lost the path completely. Jake grew increasingly frustrated with his map, folding and unfolding it, muttering about compass readings that didn't align with the terrain. Oddly, David seemed calmest as the situation deteriorated. He moved with a sureness I hadn't seen in him before, seeming to pick up on subtle cues in the landscape. The way moss grew thicker on certain sides of trees, the direction of fallen logs, the spacing of nurse stumps. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was usually to suggest a direction that turned out to be correct. "How do you know where to go?" I asked him after he'd led us back to a faded blaze for the third time. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. "I grew up with stories about these forests, the old ones where the trees remember. My grandmother taught me to read them." "What do they say?" He looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes, something I couldn't interpret. Fear, recognition. "They say we're being watched," he said. "They say something here is very old and very wrong." I laughed, uncomfortable. "You're messing with us, right? Trying to get into the Halloween spirit a few weeks early." He didn't smile. "I'm not, but I hope I'm wrong." We made camp that evening in a small clearing beside what the map called Rabbit Creek, though the creek itself was nothing more than a trickle seeping from a hillside spring. The clearing was natural, almost perfectly circular, ringed by trees so ancient they seemed to lean inward like gathered elders observing some sacred ritual. The light was failing fast, earlier than it should have, blocked by the massive forest canopy. We set up our tents in the gloom, working quickly and largely in silence. The mood had shifted. The excitement of the morning had curdled into something anxious, watchful. I kept catching myself staring into the shadows between the trees, certain I'd seen movement, then realizing it was just a branch swaying or a patch of moss catching the failing light. But sometimes, when I looked away and looked back, the shadows seemed different, like something had moved when I wasn't watching. We built a fire in a stone ring that looked like it had been there for decades, maybe longer. Someone had used this clearing before us, many times. There were remnants of old fires, charred stones arranged in careful circles, rusted cans half buried in the moss, a rusted axe head stuck in a stump. A hermit camp, maybe, or hunting camps from decades past. "Looks like people have been here before," Marcus said, sounding relieved. "Maybe we're not as remote as we thought." "It's still 20 miles to the nearest road," Jake said, "and 10 to the park boundary." 20 miles is nothing if there's hunting cabins nearby. We cooked dinner, dehydrated chili and tortillas, and ate around the fire, trying to recapture the camaraderie of the morning. But conversation felt forced. Everyone kept looking over their shoulders, straining to hear something in the darkness beyond the firelight. I noticed David eating mechanically, barely tasting his food, his eyes fixed on the tree line to the east. Following his gaze, I saw nothing but darkness, the absolute black of old-growth forest at night, unbroken by stars or moon. But David kept watching, kept waiting. "What is it?" I asked him quietly so the others wouldn't hear. "I heard something," he said, "in the woods about 10 minutes ago." "An animal." He shook his head. Animals make noise. This was, listening, watching, waiting for us to sleep. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. "That's crazy. There's nothing out there but deer and maybe a black bear." "There's something else," he said simply. "Something that shouldn't be here. Something that crossed a long way to find this place." Before I could ask what he meant, Marcus called out from across the fire, demanding to know what we were whispering about. David just shook his head and retreated into silence. I tried to forget what he'd said, to convince myself it was just nerves, the power of suggestion in an unfamiliar place. But that night, as I lay in my tent listening to the sounds of the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that David was right. That something was out there, just beyond the thin nylon walls, watching us with eyes that were neither human nor truly animal. I fell into a shallow, troubled sleep sometime after midnight. The sounds of the forest merged into dreams, trees whispering, branches creaking, something moving with deliberate silence through the undergrowth. I dreamed of faces in the bark of trees, mouths open in silent screams. I dreamed of running through endless corridors of green, pursued by something I never managed to see. I woke to the sound of whispering. It was close, right outside my tent or maybe just inside, the source impossible to locate. I lay frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs, listening to words I couldn't quite understand. The language was guttural, clicking, sliding between syllables like water over stones. It sounded old. It sounded hungry. Mia. The whisper became my name, spoken in a voice I almost recognized. Almost. There was something wrong with the intonation, the way the syllables shaped themselves around a tongue that wasn't quite human. Mia, come outside. I need to show you something. It was Jake's voice, or a perfect imitation of Jake's voice. But Jake's tent was on the other side of the clearing, and this whisper came from the wrong direction, from the trees, from the darkness where no human should be standing in the middle of the night. Mia, please, I'm scared. The voice cracked on the last word, breaking into something else, something wet and desperate. I wanted to answer, to call out to Jake, to ask if he was okay, but something stopped me. Some instinct deeper than conscious thought, some primal recognition of wrongness. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I lay in my sleeping bag, paralyzed by fear, listening to the voice pleading with me, cajoling me, threatening me. Open the tent, Mia. I can see you in there. I can smell you. You're so warm. You're so soft inside. Open the tent, Mia. Open the tent. Open the tent. The voice cycled through our names. Jake, Sarah, Marcus, David, each time speaking from a different location, each time sounding more desperate, more angry, less like anything human. I heard Sarah cry out in her tent, heard Marcus curse, heard David begin to sing something in Navajo, a steady rhythm that rose above the whispers and held them at bay. The singing seemed to confuse whatever was outside. The whispers became confused, overlapping, like multiple voices arguing in that clicking language I didn't understand. Then, abruptly, they stopped. Silence returned, or the closest approximation of silence the forest could offer. The normal sounds of night resumed. A distant owl, the wind in the canopy, the settling of the earth. But underneath it all, I could still sense presence. Still feel eyes watching from the darkness. I didn't sleep again that night. None of us did. When dawn finally grayed the sky, we emerged from our tents one by one, pale and sleepless, confirming what we already knew. Something had been in our camp. Something had walked between our tents, leaving tracks in the moss that were neither boot nor paw but something disturbingly in between. The footprints were the first concrete evidence of what we'd all feared. They circled our tents, approached and retreated, crossed and recrossed the clearing in patterns that made no sense unless you imagined a creature pacing, studying, calculating. In some places the prints were clearly animal, long and narrow, 5 toes splayed in front, shaped like a canine but wrong somehow, the proportions subtly off. In other places they were almost human, 2 feet, 5 toes, heel and arch and ball. But the worst were where the prints changed, where one track would end and another begin mid-stride, where the creature had shifted from one form to another without breaking its gait. This isn't a bear, Marcus said, kneeling to examine a print near the fire pit. Not a cougar either. Look at the toe spread, the arch. This is something that walks on 2 legs when it wants to, David finished. His face was gray, his eyes haunted, and runs on 4 when it needs to. You're talking about a skinwalker, Sarah said. She said it like a joke, the way you might say ghost or vampire or Bigfoot, with irony, with disbelief. But David didn't laugh. Don't say that name, he said quietly. Don't speak of them. My grandmother taught me. The words themselves can call them, can give them power. Come on, David. There's no such thing as, Marcus started. You heard it last night, David interrupted, his voice rising. We all heard it. The voice that sounded like Jake but wasn't Jake. The thing that walked our camp while we slept, trying to trick us into opening our tents. That's what they do. They wear the skin of animals, of people. They learn your voice, your scent, your fears. And when you're vulnerable, when you're alone, they take you. We stared at him. In the morning light, with birds singing and mist burning off in the clearing, his words sounded insane. But we had heard it. Whatever explanation we tried to construct, someone playing a prank, a trick of acoustics, a stress-induced hallucination, we couldn't deny that something had spoken to us in voices stolen from our friends. "Okay," Jake said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "Let's say, hypothetically, that there's something watching us, something dangerous. What do we do?" "We leave," David said immediately. "We pack up and we hike out as fast as we can. We don't run. Running triggers the hunt instinct, but we move with purpose. We stay together. We don't go anywhere alone, not even to piss. And we don't, under any circumstances, trust anything we hear or see that comes from outside the group." "What about the map?" Jake asked. "The valley, the ridge, we're so close. I wanted to get those photos." David turned to him, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not just worry, not just anxiety, but the bone-deep terror of someone confronting something that violated every law of the world he understood. "Jake, listen to me. That valley on your map, the place marked with warnings, that's not a destination, that's a hunting ground. That's where it lives, where it waits. The old map brought us here deliberately. Something wanted us to come." "You're saying the map is cursed?" Sarah asked, her voice incredulous. "I'm saying someone drew this trail a long time ago, knowing exactly where it led. Someone who wanted to feed this thing, or someone who was fed to it themselves and keeps drawing others to the same fate." We packed camp in record time, working in tense silence. Nobody joked. Nobody complained about the early hour or skipped breakfast. We ate energy bars while we worked, pouring the contents of our tents into packs, rolling sleeping bags, collapsing tent poles with shaking hands. I kept my eyes on the tree line, watching for movement. The forest seemed different in daylight, less threatening somehow, more ordinary. But I couldn't shake the memory of those voices, the wrongness of Jake's name spoken by something that wasn't Jake. We set out at first full light, following the trail back the way we'd come. Or tried to. Within an hour we were lost. The trail we'd followed the previous day simply wasn't there. The blazes on the trees, those old, healed-over cuts that had marked our route, had vanished. In their place were new marks, claw scratches in the bark, high up, far higher than any normal animal could reach. They looked almost like writing, if writing could be done in wood and blood and rage. "This is the right direction," Jake insisted, consulting his compass. "Southwest, we're going southwest." "Then where's the creek?" Marcus asked. "We crossed Rabbit Creek twice yesterday. There should be water." There was no creek. The forest had transformed overnight into something unrecognizable, older, denser, hung with moss that glowed faintly in the dim understory light. The trees were the wrong species, massive Sitka spruce and Pacific yew that had no business growing this far north. Nothing matched Jake's map anymore. The coordinates he recorded with his GPS didn't correspond to any known location, not in Olympic National Park, not anywhere on Earth according to his device. "We're getting farther from the trail marker," Sarah said, her voice tight. "We've been walking an hour and the terrain doesn't match." "Trust the compass," Marcus said. "The compass doesn't lie." But the compass did lie. Or the world did. By noon, when we should have been covering familiar ground, we stumbled into a landscape none of us recognized. A valley so narrow the sky was just a ribbon of gray far above, the walls rising in vertical cliffs of moss-slick stone. The trees here were ancient beyond reckoning, their trunks wider than houses, their roots exposed like grasping fingers. And everywhere the signs of habitation, ancient signs. Cairns of stacked stones lined the valley floor, placed with mathematical precision in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Symbols were carved into every flat surface, runes or pictographs or something older than both, depicting figures with too many limbs, faces without features, animals with human eyes. Between the carvings, dried brown stains that might have been sap or might have been blood. "This valley," David whispered, his Navajo song dying on his lips. "This is the forbidden place." "What is it?" I asked. "A gathering place, a feeding ground. Someone used to bring sacrifices here, something still does." We turned back immediately, or tried to. But the way we'd come had changed again. The trail ended at a wall of Devil's Club so dense it was impassable. When we tried to go around, we found ourselves deeper in the valley, surrounded on all sides by walls that seemed to grow taller as we watched. The light was failing again, though it was barely 3 in the afternoon. The canopy here was absolute, unbroken, the trees leaning together to block out the sun. Bioluminescent fungi began to glow along the trunks, casting everything in sickly green and pale blue. "We need to find shelter," Marcus said, trying to sound authoritative. "Find a defensible position and wait for rescue. We have SAT communicators. We can call for help." He pulled his device from his pack and switched it on. The screen flickered, displaying coordinates that made no sense, then went black. He tried Sarah's. Same result. Jake's GPS was dead, and all our phones showed no signal despite the fact that we should have had at least minimal connectivity. "EMP," Marcus muttered. "Or magnetic interference. Something's blocking the electronics." "It's the valley," David said. "Places like this. They exist outside the normal world. In the old stories they're called thin places where the boundaries between what's real and what's other grow weak." We found shelter in a shallow cave at the base of the western cliff, barely large enough for the 5 of us. The entrance was narrow, forcing us to crawl on our bellies to enter, which meant it would also force whatever was outside to do the same. That was the theory anyway. We blocked the entrance with packs and fallen branches, creating a barrier that wouldn't stop anything determined but might slow it down, might give us warning. Then we huddled together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the valley. The sounds were wrong. There were no birds, no insects, no rustling of small mammals in the underbrush. The forest made noise, the creaking of branches, the dripping of condensation, the movement of air through spaces too tight for wind. But it was the sound of a place without life, a place where everything that could run had already fled. And underneath it all, carried on frequencies below the threshold of conscious hearing, the whispering began again. "Sarah, oh Sarah, I'm hurt. I fell, can you help me?" The voice came from the darkness outside, from beyond our pathetic barricade. It was Jake's voice, perfect in every detail except for the wet gurgle underneath, like someone speaking through a mouthful of blood. "I can see you in there, Sarah. I can smell your shampoo, coconut and vanilla. You always smelled so good, Sarah. Come out and hold me. I'm so cold out here." Sarah made a sound like a wounded animal pressing herself against the back of the cave. Jake, the real Jake, sitting beside her, grabbed her hand and whispered desperately, "That's not me. Don't listen. Sarah, that's not me." "If that's not you," the voice said from outside, "then why does it look like you? Why does it smell like you? Come out, Sarah. I have something to show you, something wonderful." The voice shifted, became my mother's voice, speaking from 2 years beyond the grave, calling me home for dinner, asking why I'd stayed out so late. "Mia, baby, I'm worried about you. Come out of the dark, come to Mama." I screamed. I couldn't help it. The scream tore from my throat like a confession, like a surrender, and when it ended I was weeping, curled against the cold stone, wanting nothing more than to scramble out of that cave and into my mother's arms, even knowing it was a trick, knowing she was dead and buried in Tacoma. David started singing again, his Navajo prayer song rising and falling like a heartbeat. The voices stopped, confused, angry. You, something said, and this time the voice was just sound, just intention without human form scraping against my mind like fingernails on slate. You know the old words, you smell of the DNA, but you're far from home, son of changing woman, far from Hogan and Hastings. The desert can't protect you here. This forest is older than your ancestors. This forest remembers when the first humans walked, and it is hungry. You have no power over me, David said, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. I carry the blessing of my grandmother. I walk the beauty way. Beauty way, the voice mocked, multiplying into overlapping tones that scraped against each other like failing machinery. Beauty way, we remember when your grandmothers were children, when they huddled in caves and feared the dark. We were already old. We are always old, and we are so very hungry. The whispers continued for hours, an endless litany of our fears, our regrets, our secrets. It knew everything. The affair I'd had in college that I'd never told anyone about. The child Sarah had miscarried before she met Jake. The men Marcus had killed in Fallujah. The faces he saw when he closed his eyes. It spoke them into existence, made them real in the darkness, until we were all weeping, all broken, all barely clinging to sanity. And then sometime after midnight, the whispers stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Heavy, expectant. The silence that comes before the strike of a snake, the pounce of a predator. It's moving, David breathed. It's circling, looking for another way in. We waited through the night, barely breathing, listening to the sounds of something massive moving outside our shelter. It didn't make much noise. That was the worst part. Just the occasional scrape of claw on stone, the soft pad of feet that were sometimes paws and sometimes hands, testing the walls of our cave in places we hadn't realized were weak. Sometime before dawn, Sarah spoke for the first time in hours. "I have to pee," she whispered. "Hold it," Marcus said. "I can't. I've been holding it for 6 hours. I can't wait anymore." "You can't go out there." "I have to." We argued in whispers, fierce and desperate. In the end, I volunteered to go with her. 2 people, we reasoned, would be safer than 1. We took our knives, useless against what was out there but better than nothing, and pushed aside the barricade just enough to squeeze through. The valley was dark, the green glow of fungi our only light. I held Sarah's hand as we crept to the edge of the cave, listening. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. The forest held its breath with us. We found a spot 30 yards from the cave entrance, sheltered by a fallen log. Sarah squatted behind it while I stood guard, knife raised, eyes scanning the darkness. I heard her sigh of relief, the rustle of clothing. Then I heard her scream. It happened so fast I couldn't process it. One moment she was behind the log, the next something large and pale had her by the waist, lifting her into the air. I saw it only briefly, a shape that was vaguely human but wrong in every one of its proportions, arms too long, legs bent backwards, skin that was loose and hanging in strips like it had been partially peeled away. It ran, carrying Sarah, moving on 4 limbs with a speed impossible for anything its size. It vanished into the darkness before I could even scream. I ran back to the cave, screaming her name, and the others emerged armed with tent poles and hiking axes, but it was too late. Somewhere in the valley, Sarah's screams continued, rising and falling in a rhythm that suggested she was still alive, still aware, being carried somewhere. Jake ran into the darkness before we could stop him, shouting her name, and we heard his scream too. A different sound, full of rage and grief, and something that might have been recognition. Then silence. We found Jake's body at dawn. He'd made it perhaps 200 yards from the cave before something caught him. I won't describe what we found in detail. I can't. The images are burned into my mind in ways no amount of therapy will ever erase. He'd been torn. That was the only way to put it. Torn and scattered across a 20-yard radius of moss and stone. His camera, the expensive one he'd saved 6 months to buy, lay crushed in the dirt, the memory card intact, the last photos on it showing something that should not exist, eyes glowing in the flash, red as coals, set in a face that was wolf and human and neither, the moment before impact. We buried what we could find in shallow graves marked with stones. Marcus said a few words he remembered from his grandmother's funeral. David sang his Navajo song until he couldn't sing anymore, until his voice gave out completely. 3 of us left then, Marcus, David, and me. Marcus was in shock, functioning on autopilot, checking his weapons compulsively. A hunting knife, a small hatchet, the flare gun he carried for emergencies. David was withdrawn, barely responsive, lost in something I couldn't reach. I was hollow, walking through the motions because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant screaming. We searched for Sarah's body for 2 hours but found nothing. No blood trail, no drag marks, no sign of where she'd been taken. It was like the forest had swallowed her whole. The Skinwalker, David, no longer tried to hide what it was, left us alone while we buried Jake. Perhaps it was sated, temporarily. Perhaps it enjoyed the mourning, fed on the grief like spice. When we finally set out again, following the valley floor because no other path existed anymore, it began watching us again. We could feel it. In the movement of shadows, in the sudden silence when the wind stopped, in the way the fungi seemed to glow brighter when it was near. "It's playing with us," Marcus said, "leading us deeper." "It's leading us to the gathering place," David said. "To the heart of its territory we shouldn't follow. We don't have a choice." He was right. The valley walls had closed in until we were walking single file along a stream bed, and the cliffs on either side were unclimbable, smooth as glass, slick with moisture. Ahead the valley opened into something else, a basin, a bowl in the earth where the trees grew in impossible spirals and the air felt heavy, thick, wrong. The Skinwalker waited for us there. It was standing on a fallen log, watching us approach. At first I thought it was a bear, a large one standing on its hind legs. But bears don't stand like that, don't hold themselves with such casual confidence, don't watch with intelligence in their eyes. It shifted as we watched. The bear shape flowed, reformed, became something else. A wolf, massive and pale, with eyes that glowed red in the dim light. Then a deer with human hands. Then a coyote. Then something that was almost human, vaguely female, naked, hairless, with skin that hung in loose folds like it had been stretched and released. It smiled at us. A human smile in a face that was learning to be human, getting better at it, practicing. "You're almost here," it said, in a voice like Sarah's but wrong somehow, pitched too low, with sounds underneath the words that no human throat could make. "Almost to the center, almost to where the old ones rest. Won't you come the rest of the way? There's food here, shelter, warmth." Marcus raised his flare gun. "Stay back, whatever you are." "Ah, soldier, I smell the blood on you, so much blood from far away. You think your violence protects you, that your weapons mean anything here. I knew warriors before your species named itself Homo sapiens. I fed on their pride, I fed on their certainty." I said, "Stay back." "Or what, you'll burn me, shoot me, cut me," it laughed, the sound like breaking branches. "I have worn 1,000 skins, soldier, I have died 1,000 deaths. I always return, I always hunger. This form is temporary, this form is play." It shifted again, becoming something that made me scream. A perfect image of Sarah, naked and pale, her eyes glowing red, her mouth open in a smile that showed too many teeth. "Sarah missed you," it said in her voice. "She says to tell you she's warm now. She's so warm, she wants you to be warm too. Come to her, Mia. Come, let me show you what warmth means." Marcus fired the flare gun. The flare struck the log in a burst of magnesium-white light, and for an instant we saw everything. The creature in its true form, or as close as we could perceive it. A thing of too many limbs and joints that bent wrong, and skin that wasn't skin at all but something else, something grown or woven or stolen. And behind it in the trees we saw the others. Dozens of them, watching, waiting, Skinwalkers or aspects of the same creature or something else entirely. The light burned too bright to see clearly, and when it faded, the creature was gone, vanished into the forest, leaving only the smell of burning wood and something else, something organic and foul. "Run," David said, and we ran. We ran until we couldn't run anymore, until our lungs burned and our legs turned to jelly. The valley system seemed endless, a maze of dead ends and false passages, each one leading deeper into the heart of the forest. The Skinwalker didn't pursue us directly, not yet. It let us run, let us exhaust ourselves, let us hope. That was its game, hope before despair, strength before weakness, trust before betrayal. We found a stream of actual flowing water around noon, clear and cold, running over stones. We drank until we were sick, filled our bottles, washed our faces. Marcus washed Jake's blood from his hands, scrubbing until the skin turned red and raw. "We're going to die here," he said, "not to anyone in particular." "No," David said. "There's a way out. There's always a way out, the old stories say." "I don't care about your stories, David. Your stories didn't save Jake. They didn't save Sarah. They won't save us." "They would have if you'd listened, if you turned back when I said." Marcus turned on him, eyes wild. "You didn't say anything. You just let us walk into this trap, let us." "I warned you. I warned all of you, but you wanted adventure. You wanted untouched wilderness. You wanted to go where no one had gone before." David stood facing Marcus, and for the first time I saw anger in him, real anger, older than our current situation, rooted in something ancestral. "You don't understand what you trespassed in. This isn't just a valley. This is Skinwalker Valley. The valley without a name, because names have power, and the Navajo elders made sure this place would never be named, would never be spoken of, would be forgotten by history." "What are you talking about?" I asked. David turned to me and I saw tears in his eyes. "My great-uncle disappeared in 1964, hiking in Washington state with some university friends. They found his body in the Quinault rainforest, but not his friends. Never his friends, just him, nailed to a tree, skinned. The tribal council knows about this place. They know about more places like it. Places where the boundaries are thin, where ancient things cross over and wear flesh like clothing." "Why didn't you tell us?" Marcus demanded. "Would it have mattered? You were already here when I met you. You were already caught in the trap. The map chooses its victims. It's been doing this for decades, maybe longer." I thought of the garage sale, the old man selling the map, his grandfather's map. Had he known? Had he been trying to get rid of it, to pass the curse to someone else? "So how do we get out?" I asked. David was quiet for a long moment. "We don't," he said finally. "Not all of us. One of us might make it if they're willing to sacrifice, if they're willing to pay the price." "What price?" "The price the old ones always ask. Blood for passage, life for life." Marcus refused to accept it. He was a soldier, he said. He'd survived worse, seen worse, done worse. We would fight our way out, or we would die trying. He broke away from us an hour later, determined to find a path up the valley walls, convinced he could climb out if he found the right spot. David tried to stop him, tried to explain that the Skinwalker wanted us to separate, wanted us to believe escape was possible, but Marcus wasn't listening anymore. "I'll come back for you," he said, checking his knife and hatchet. "When I find the way out, I'll come back." "You won't," David said. "It won't let you." "Watch me." He disappeared into the trees, moving with purpose, and we heard his progress for a while, the snapping of branches, the crunch of boots on stone. Then silence. Not the sudden silence that signaled the Skinwalker's presence, but a gradual fading until even the sound of his breathing was gone. We waited. We waited for 3 hours, until the light began to fail again, and the realization sank in that Marcus wasn't coming back. David stood abruptly. "We have to move now, while it's occupied." "Occupied with what?" "Him." We ran again in the opposite direction. following the stream down, hoping to find where the valley opened up, where the cliffs became climbable, where the world was normal again. We ran until David stopped suddenly, holding up his hand. "Listen." I did, and I heard it, the sound of Marcus groaning, somewhere ahead, somewhere close. "Help, please help me." David grabbed my arm. "Don't, it's not him." "But what if it is?" "It's not. We can't just leave him." I pulled away, moving toward the sound. "Marcus, where are you?" "Here, I'm here. Oh God, I'm hurt, it's bad, please." The voice came from a dense thicket of ferns, dark and impenetrable. I moved toward it, knife in hand, knowing I was making a mistake, unable to stop myself. David tackled me from behind, knocking me to the ground just as something tore through the space where I'd been standing. I heard the whoosh of air, felt the brush of claws pass inches from my face. "Run!" David screamed, pulling me up, and we ran again. Behind us, Marcus's voice laughed, the wet chuckle of something wearing his mouth like a mask. Night fell completely, the absolute darkness of a forest untouched by moon or stars. We couldn't run anymore. We could barely walk. We found a hollow tree, massive and ancient, partially hollowed out by rot, and crawled inside. The opening was small, the interior barely large enough for the two of us to huddle together. We didn't speak. Speech seemed dangerous now, as if words might give away our position, our fear, our exhaustion. We just held each other and listened to the forest, to the things that walked and watched and waited. Outside in the valley, the Skinwalker spoke to us in David's voice, the real David, the one who was pressed against me in the hollow. "Mia," it said, "I have to go outside, I have to check something, stay here, don't follow me." I gripped David's arm harder, feeling his pulse racing to match my own. The voice outside was perfect. It knew everything, how he spoke, how he breathed, the way he smelled. It knew. "David's going to die out there," the voice said. "He's going to die screaming, just like Sarah, just like Jake, just like Marcus. And then it'll be your turn, Mia. You'll be alone, alone in the dark, alone forever." David's lips moved against my ear, barely audible. "It's trying to separate us. Don't listen, don't respond." "I can hear him breathing," the voice said. "I can hear his heart racing. He's so afraid, Mia, and you're afraid too. I can smell it. The fear lets me find you. The fear makes you delicious." Hours passed, or minutes. Time had no meaning in that dark hollow. We held each other, two survivors, two people who had watched friends die and were waiting for our own turn. And then David whispered something I didn't understand. "I have to go." "What? No, David, no. You can survive. One of you can always survive if the sacrifice is made. Don't speak like that. We're going to get out together." He pulled away, turning to face me in the darkness. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel the warmth of his breath, the weight of his hand on my shoulder. My grandmother taught me about these things, about the Skinwalkers, the Yi Naldlushia. They were people once, medicine men who chose the dark path. Now they're something else, something that can be bargained with if you know the price. "David." Blood for passage, life for life. One must remain so the others can leave. "No, no, we're not doing this. We're both leaving." "You can, you will, because I'm going to make you." He moved before I could stop him, crawling out of the hollow into the darkness. I reached for him, grabbed his ankle, but he kicked free. "Stay here," he said. "Whatever you hear, whatever sounds I make, do not come out. Count to 1,000 slowly and then run. Run toward the brightest star. Follow the water down. Do not stop. Do not look back. And do not speak of this place by name." "David." "Remember me," he said. "Remember all of us, and be worthy of our sacrifice." Then he was gone, singing his Navajo song, walking boldly into the darkness, drawing the attention of the thing that waited there. I heard it move, heard it respond to the song, to the challenge, heard them meet in the forest somewhere beyond my hiding place, And then I heard things I will not describe, sounds that no human should make, sounds that no human should have to hear. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time I reached 1,000, the sounds had stopped. I ran. I don't remember much of the running. The next clear memory I have is of stumbling out of the forest and onto a gravel road, a real road, with a sign that said Highway 101 12 miles. The sky was gray with dawn. The world was normal again. I walked the 12 miles. I walked past cars that didn't stop, past a ranger station that was closed, all the way to the town of Forks where I collapsed in the parking lot of a diner and someone called 911. The authorities found the vehicles where we'd parked them, 12 miles from where I'd emerged. They found our gear, our campsites from the first night, evidence that we'd been there. But they never found the valley, never found David or Marcus or Sarah or Jake, never found anything that supported my story except for the blood, so much blood that even the FBI got involved, even though they declared the case officially unsolved, presumed homicide. The official story is that a wildlife predator killed my friends and I survived by chance, by luck, by being in the right place at the right time. The unofficial story, the one whispered by older rangers and tribal elders, is that I survived because someone paid the price in blood. Someone made the sacrifice that allowed me to walk out of a place that should have swallowed me whole. I believe the unofficial story. 1 year later, I'm writing this from a small apartment in Portland, far from the Olympic Peninsula, far from the forests. I take a lot of medication. I see a therapist twice a week. I haven't slept through the night since that third night in the hollow tree. The Skinwalker hasn't forgotten me. I know this because I still hear it sometimes in the voices of strangers on the street, in the creaking of floorboards at night, in the spaces between words on the radio. It's watching, it's waiting, it's patient. But it hasn't claimed me yet. Maybe because I know the rules now. Maybe because I honor the sacrifice. Maybe just because it enjoys the chase and I'm still running. I have the map, though I wish I didn't. Sometimes I take it out of the safe deposit box and look at it, tracing the trail with my finger, finding the valley that shouldn't exist. Sometimes, late at night, I think about going back, about finishing what we started, about paying my own price. Mostly, though, I write this account. I tell the truth, or as much of it as I can bear. I warn others not to trust old maps, not to seek out valleys that don't appear on modern charts, not to go where the trees whisper and the shadows move wrong. Not to go where the skinwalkers wait. If you're reading this, you already know more than you should. Be careful what you speak of. Be careful where you walk at night. And if you ever find yourself in a forest that feels older than memory, where the light fails and the whispers begin, run. Run as fast as you can. And don't look back. 2 weeks after I finished writing this account, I received a package at my apartment. No return address. No postage mark. Just my name written in handwriting I almost recognized, Sarah's handwriting, or a perfect imitation of it. Inside was a photograph, one I couldn't explain, one that shouldn't exist. It showed the five of us as we were when we started the trip, smiling, whole, alive. Jake with his camera raised, Sarah laughing at something Marcus said, David watching the trees with that quiet stillness, me holding the map. We were standing in the valley, the impossible valley, with the spiraled trees and the glowing fungi and the cliff walls that touched the sky. And behind us, barely visible in the shadows, stood something else. Something wearing David's skin, or a perfect imitation of it, smiling at the camera with eyes that glowed red even in the daylight. On the back of the photograph, written in the same handwriting as the name on the envelope, were 5 words. Not all of you left. I burned the photograph. I burned the envelope. I packed my bags and moved again to another city, another life, another attempt to outrun what followed me from those woods. But I still have the map, and sometimes, late at night, I hear David's voice calling from the darkness, telling me it's time to come home. Maybe soon I will. Maybe I've been running long enough. Maybe the valley is still waiting. I can hear it now, in the woods behind my new apartment. I've been hearing it for weeks, growing closer, patient as only the truly ancient can be. It's time. The Cave of Whispering Bones, by Dr. Elena Vargas, Ph.D. Final Testament. My name is Elena Vargas, and I am the only one left who knows the truth about what happened to my team in Canyonlands National Park between October 14th and October 17th, 2019. I write this now, 1 week after Marcus Chen disappeared from his home in Santa Fe, leaving behind only his blood smeared across his bedroom wall and a smell like burning meat that no cleaning service can remove. The police think he was abducted. The FBI thinks it might be murder. But I know what took him. I know because I saw it in its true form 3 nights ago, deep in the maze canyons where the ancient Puebloan people once buried their most terrible secrets. I am a professor of southwestern archaeology at the University of Colorado, and for the past 15 years, I have dedicated my life to tracking down the lost ceremonial sites of the ancestral Puebloans. My team consisted of 5 other dedicated historians, each handpicked for their expertise. There was Marcus Chen, our linguist and cryptographer, who could read more dead languages than any living scholar I knew. Sarah Whitmore, our cultural anthropologist, specializing in prehistoric indigenous religion and ritual practices. Dr. James Holloway, our senior geologist and cartographer, who had mapped more uncharted canyon systems than any other living academic. Rebecca Torres, our brilliant but naive graduate student, specializing in iconography and petroglyph interpretation. And finally, Thomas "Tommy" Blackwood, our equipment specialist and survival expert, a former Army Ranger who kept us safe during our countless expeditions into dangerous territory. We found it on October 3rd, in the Special Collections Archive of the Newberry Library in Chicago. I had been searching for references to a place the early Spanish missionaries called La Caverna del Diablo, the Devil's Cavern. The story had seemed like superstitious nonsense at first, just another colonial myth about native demon worship. But then Marcus came running into my office that rainy afternoon, clutching a crumbling leather folio that we'd retrieved months earlier from a private estate sale in Durango. "It's real, Elena," he said, his voice trembling. "It's all real, and we need to go there before anyone else finds it." The Cartwright Codex, as we came to call it, was written by a Jesuit missionary named Father Ambrose Cartwright in 1675. He had been part of a mission to the Pueblo peoples that went terribly wrong, 17 priests and their native converts slaughtered in a single night. Cartwright claimed to have escaped, wandering alone for 3 weeks before being rescued by Spanish soldiers. His account, written during his recovery in Santa Fe, described a sacred cave deep in what is now Canyonlands National Park, where the ancient Puebloan people had performed their most unspeakable rites. But it wasn't the description of the cave that made my blood run cold. It was Cartwright's detailed account of what the cave contained: a prisoner. Not a human prisoner, but something that wore human skin like a coat, something that could speak with dead voices and run faster than a horse on legs that bent backward like a coyote's. The natives called it Yi Naldlushia, the Skinwalker, and according to Cartwright, the cave contained the most complete set of instructions for binding such a creature that had ever been committed to writing. "This is the find of a lifetime," James said, when we all gathered in my office to examine the codex. "If this is legitimate, we're looking at the only surviving documentation of an active Native American binding ritual. The academic implications are staggering." Sarah was more cautious. "We need to consider the cultural implications. This is sensitive material. The Navajo still believe in skinwalkers. Many Pueblo communities maintain these traditions. If we're going to investigate this, we need to do it with the utmost respect. I agreed with Sarah, but I also knew that some discoveries are too important to ignore. We spent the next week preparing, gathering permits, consulting with tribal historians, though we were careful about exactly what we were seeking, and outfitting ourselves for what promised to be a challenging expedition. The Cartwright Codex contained detailed directions to the cave, referencing landmarks that still existed, a formation called the Devil's Thumb, a dry waterfall called the Weeping Wall, and most specifically, a cave entrance marked by petroglyphs showing a man becoming a beast. Marcus had cross-referenced these with modern satellite imagery and old geological surveys, pinpointing an area in the Maze district of Canyonlands, one of the most remote and least visited sections of the park. We flew into Moab on October 13th, spending the night at a motel where the desk clerk warned us about strange things in the Maze district. "People go missing out there," he said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "Not just hikers who get lost, people who just vanish. The rangers find their campsites intact, food still in the coolers, tents set up. Just no people." I dismissed it as local superstition, though I noticed Tommy taking extra care with our satellite phone and emergency beacons. We entered the park at dawn on October 14th, driving our rented 4x4 as far as the road would take us, then transferring to hiking gear. The Maze District lives up to its name, a labyrinth of sandstone canyons, some hundreds of feet deep, with walls that seem to shift and change as the light moves across them. By midday, we had lost all cell reception. By late afternoon, we were deep in territory where no ranger patrol had been for months. "The entrance should be just past this ridge," Marcus called out, consulting the codex and his GPS. "Cartwright describes it as being in a box canyon shaped like a crescent moon." We found the canyon at sunset, the red sandstone walls glowing like embers in the dying light. And there, exactly where Cartwright had described, we found the cave entrance, a narrow opening 20 feet up the canyon wall, accessible only by a treacherous scramble up loose rock. But what made my heart stop were the petroglyphs. They were everywhere, covering the cliff face in a band 10 feet high and 30 feet across. I had seen thousands of petroglyphs in my career, but these were different. They were older, for one thing. The patina suggested they were at least 1,000 years old, and they were terrifying. The images showed human figures in various stages of transformation, arms becoming legs, faces elongating into muzzles, skin peeling away to reveal something else underneath. There were scenes of violence, 2 figures running, figures dying, and always in the center, a larger figure that seemed wrong in a way I couldn't quite articulate. It had too many joints in its limbs. Its proportions were subtly off, and even carved in ancient stone, there was something about its eyes that seemed to follow you. "My God," Rebecca whispered, her camera clicking madly. "These are masterworks. I've never seen such detailed iconography from this period." "Elena," Sarah said quietly from behind me. I turned to find her staring not at the petroglyphs but at the cave itself. "Do you smell that?" I inhaled. There was something coming from the cave entrance, a smell like old copper and something else, something organic and sweet like rotting flowers. It wasn't strong, but it was unmistakable. "Could be bat guano," Tommy suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. We made camp at the base of the cliff that night, too tired, and it was too dark to attempt the climb. I remember staring up at the cave entrance, barely visible now in the moonlight, and feeling for the first time a sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. It wasn't just the remoteness or the strangeness of the petroglyphs. It was something deeper, something primal. My instincts were screaming at me to leave, to pretend we'd never found this place, to burn the Cartwright Codex and never speak of it again. But I'm a scientist. I don't believe in monsters. I don't believe in curses. And I certainly don't believe in skinwalkers. I wish I had listened. We climbed to the cave entrance at first light on October 15th. Tommy went first, securing ropes for the rest of us to follow. The scramble was difficult but not impossible, and by mid-morning, all 6 of us had gathered at the cave mouth. "Everyone got their headlamps?" I asked, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "Remember, we document everything. No one touches anything until we've photographed and recorded it. Sarah, I want you taking notes on anything that looks like ritual significance. James, you're mapping. Rebecca, you're on iconography. Marcus, work with me on the text. Tommy, you've got our backs." We entered the cave single file, Tommy in the rear with his rifle slung over his shoulder. The entrance tunnel was narrow and low, forcing us to crouch walk for the first 30 feet. Then, suddenly, it opened up into a chamber that made me forget to breathe. The cave was cathedral-like in its proportions, a natural amphitheater roughly 50 feet across and 30 feet high, the ceiling lost in shadow above the reach of our headlamps. But it wasn't the size that took my breath away. It was the walls. Every surface was covered in paintings and carvings. The pigments were still vibrant after centuries, deep reds and blacks and ochres, depicting scenes of such violence and strangeness that I found myself physically stepping backward into James. "This isn't Puebloan," Rebecca said, her voice hushed with awe. "I mean, it is, but it's older, much older. This is archaic period work, maybe even earlier. Elena, some of these symbols predate the ancestral Puebloans by thousands of years." She was right. I've seen artifacts from the basket maker period, from the earliest agricultural settlements in the Southwest. This was older. This was from a time when these canyons were first being explored by human beings, when the hunters who crossed the Bering Land Bridge still remembered a world older and darker than the one we know now. The paintings showed a narrative, I realized as I moved my lamp across the walls. A story told in panels that circled the entire chamber. In the first panel, there were human figures, dozens of them, wearing elaborate headdresses and carrying tools I didn't recognize. They were gathered around something in the center of the chamber. Walking slowly, following the narrative clockwise, I saw the story unfold. The figures in the center of the gathering were changing, or being changed. Their skin was depicted as peeling away, being pulled off like a garment, revealing something underneath that had too many limbs, too many joints, a face that was mostly teeth. "It's a transformation ritual," Sarah breathed, her voice shaking. "They're creating something, or summoning it, or binding it. Look at this." She pointed to the next panel. The transformed figure was shown attacking the others, running on 4 legs, moving faster than should be possible, its body a nightmare of impossible anatomy. The human figures were fleeing, dying, their blood depicted in ancient red pigment that looked disturbingly fresh. But then came the binding. The final panels showed something different, a circle of figures, standing around the transformed creature. They weren't running anymore. They were working together, performing some kind of ritual. And in the final image, the creature was shown contained, trapped within a circle of symbols that repeated around the entire chamber in a band near the floor. "Elena," James called from the far side of the chamber, "you've got to see this." He had found something in the floor, a circle of stones, each one carved with the same symbols that appeared in the final panel. The stones formed a ring about 10 feet across, and in the center there was a pit. Not a natural formation, this was carved, carefully constructed, lined with stone, and it was sealed. The seal was made of what looked like dried clay, but as I knelt to examine it, I realized it wasn't clay at all. It was something organic, something that had once been alive. "Elena," Marcus said quietly, kneeling beside me, "look at the markings on the seal. They're not just decorative." He was right. The seal was covered in small, precise symbols, the same symbols that appeared in the binding ritual depicted on the walls. And at the very center, carved deep into whatever dried, leather-like substance formed the seal's surface, was a single word in a language that predated the others. "Marcus," I asked. He was silent for a long moment, his finger tracing the symbol. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. It says containment or prison, but there's something else, a warning. It says, do not break the circle. The one who walks in skins must never walk free. I should have stopped there. I should have photographed everything, documented the findings, and left that seal exactly as we found it. But I was thinking about my career, about the papers I would publish, about proving Cartwright's insane story was actually historical fact. I was thinking about everything except the thing that had listened to 6 humans breathing in its tomb for 344 years, waiting for someone careless enough to set it free. Help me document the seal, I said, reaching for my camera. I want measurements, material samples if possible, and I never finished the sentence. Because that's when Rebecca, reaching for a better camera angle, slipped on the loose stone at the edge of the pit. I heard her cry out, saw her arms windmilling, and then she fell not into the pit, but against the stone ring, her full weight crashing into the ancient seal. The sound it made when it broke was like nothing I've ever heard. It wasn't a crack or a shatter. It was a wet, tearing sound, like fabric ripping, like flesh parting under a blade. And the smell that rose from the pit was immediate and overwhelming, copper and rotting flowers and something else, something that smelled like fear itself, like the chemical scent of adrenaline and terror. Get back, Tommy shouted, grabbing his rifle. Everyone away from the pit. We scrambled backward toward the entrance, my heart hammering against my ribs. The headlamps caught something moving in the darkness of the pit, something that shouldn't have been able to fit in a space that size, something that unfolded itself in ways that made my eyes water and my stomach heave. The paintings, Sarah was chanting, her voice high and broken. Oh God, the paintings were real, they're real, it's real. Shut up, James snapped. Alina, what do we do? I was frozen. For the first time in my academic career, for the first time since I was a child, I was utterly paralyzed by fear, because I could see it now. I could really see it. It climbed out of the pit like liquid poured into a human shape, and then discarded that shape as soon as it cleared the rim. Its skin, if it was skin, hung loose and wrong, like a costume too large for what wore it. And underneath, I refuse to describe what I saw in detail. Even now, writing this, I can feel my mind trying to protect itself, trying to blur the edges of that memory until it becomes something I can almost convince myself wasn't real. But I know what I saw. It had 7 limbs, I think, or maybe 9. It moved on legs that bent backward, and its arms, if they were arms, ended in hands with too many joints and fingers that were too long. Its face was the worst part. It had a face, or something like a face, but the features kept shifting, like it was trying to remember what human faces looked like and couldn't quite get it right. That was what I first thought, but then it smiled, and I realized it wasn't trying to look human. It was mocking us. Run, I whispered. No one moved. We were all frozen, caught in the headlights of our own disbelief. And then it spoke. You woke me, it said, and its voice was like 3 voices speaking at once, one high and wet, one low and grinding, and one that sounded almost human. The circle is broken, the skin is shed, I will walk, and I will wear your skin, as you have worn my patience. Tommy was the first to react. He raised his rifle and fired 3 shots into the thing's center mass. The sound was deafening in the stone chamber, and the muzzle flash blinded me momentarily. When my vision cleared, the thing was still standing, still smiling, and Tommy's bullets were lying on the stone floor, unbloodied, as if they had passed right through it. Run, Tommy screamed, and this time we listened. We fled toward the entrance tunnel, all 6 of us, slipping and scrabbling on the loose stone. I was in the lead, driven by primal terror, with Marcus close behind me. I heard Rebecca crying, heard James cursing, heard Sarah praying in Hebrew words I hadn't known she knew. We made it to the tunnel. I was halfway through, crawling on my hands and knees when I heard the scream. It was Rebecca. I tried to turn, tried to see what was happening, but Marcus was pushing me forward, screaming at me not to stop, not to look back. "It's got her," James bellowed from behind us. "Oh God, it's got her, shoot it, Tommy, shoot it." More gunshots. More screaming, not Rebecca's voice anymore, but something that sounded like her voice being torn apart and played back at the wrong speed. "Don't look back," Marcus screamed in my ear. "Elena, don't look back." We burst out of the cave entrance into the twilight of the canyon, the red walls now glowing like the walls of hell itself. I stumbled to my feet, panting, and turned to count my team. Marcus was there, his face pale as death. James was there, clutching his arm where he had scraped it crawling through the tunnel. Sarah was there, her eyes wide and unseeing, her mouth still forming silent prayers. Tommy was there, his rifle smoking, his hands shaking. Rebecca was not there. "Where is she?" I gasped. "Where's Rebecca?" Tommy's eyes met mine, and in them I saw something that terrified me more than the creature in the cave. "It took her," he said, his voice empty. "It took her back down into the pit. I tried to shoot it, but the bullets went through. They just went through." "We have to go back," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "We have to get her." "Elena," James grabbed my shoulder, his grip painful. "Did you see what that was? Did you see it? We can't go back. We need to get to the truck, get to the Rangers, get help." "She's still alive," Sarah whispered. We all turned to look at her. I heard her when it pulled her down. She was screaming for her mother. "She's still alive down there." We stood there in the Crescent Canyon as the last light faded, 5 historians paralyzed by the impossible choice before us. The cave entrance loomed above us, dark and patient, and somewhere in the depths of the earth, beneath tons of red sandstone, something that had learned to wear human skin was doing terrible things to Rebecca Torres. That was when I remembered the final panel of the paintings, the binding ritual, the circle of figures working together to trap the creature, to send it back to whatever hell had spawned it. "The paintings," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "There was a way to bind it. The natives bound it before. We could bind it again." "Are you insane?" James shouted. "Did you see what that thing did? It took Rebecca like she was nothing, like she was a toy. We need to leave, Elena. We need to run and never come back." "And leave Rebecca to die," I shot back. "Leave that thing loose. It knows our faces, James. It heard our voices. Do you think it's going to stay in that cave? Do you think it's going to let us just drive away?" "She's right," Tommy said quietly. He had reloaded his rifle, though I didn't know why. "It's already wearing her voice. I heard it. When it went down the tunnel, it was calling to us. In Rebecca's voice, it said it was cold. It said it needed help. It sounded exactly like her." The canyon seemed to grow darker. The stars were coming out overhead, but their light didn't seem to reach the canyon floor. And in the darkness of the cave entrance, I thought I saw movement. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," I said, forcing my academic training to override my terror. "The paintings showed a ritual, a specific set of actions, symbols, sacrifices. If we can replicate that ritual, we can bind it again, trap it." "Sacrifices," Marcus repeated. "You saw that part too, didn't you? The final panel, the circle of figures. There were 5 of them, Elena, 5 surrounding the creature. One was different." I had seen it. I just hadn't let myself process it. In the final panel, in the binding ritual, there were 5 figures. But one of them wasn't standing. One of them was on the ground, their body twisted in a posture that could only mean death. The other 4 were holding weapons, tools, performing the ritual while their sacrifice bled out on the stone floor. "It requires a death," Sarah said, her voice flat. "To bind it, someone has to die. That's the price. That's always the price for this kind of magic. Blood for blood, life for life." "We don't know that," I protested. "We don't know how to interpret those symbols. Maybe it means something else. Maybe." A sound cut me off. It was coming from the cave, drifting down like smoke. It was Rebecca's voice, high and sweet, calling my name. "Dr. Vargas, I'm scared. It's so dark down here. Please come get me. Please don't leave me here." The voice was perfect, exactly right. If I hadn't seen what happened, I would have believed it was her. "Don't listen," Tommy said, raising his rifle toward the sound. "It's not her, it's wearing her. That's what it does, it wears people." "Alina," the voice called again. It hurts so much. I can feel it inside me. Please, Alina, I'm your student. You have to save me, you have to." The voice broke into a wet, choking laugh that rose in pitch until it didn't sound human at all. And then it was gone. "We're going back in," I said, and the words felt like they were being pulled from my chest by hooks. "But we're going to be smart about it. We need to study those paintings. We need to understand exactly what the ritual requires. And then we're going to bind that thing back in its hole, and we're going to get Rebecca out." "She's dead, Alina," James said. "You know she's dead." "Maybe," I admitted, "but we don't know that for sure, and even if she is, we can't leave this thing loose. We can't let it walk out of here." We made our plan as the moon rose over the canyon walls. We would rest until dawn. None of us could face those tunnels in the dark. We would document the paintings, learn the ritual, and then we would go back down and finish what the Ancient Ones had started. We didn't know then that the Skinwalker was listening. We didn't know that it could smell our fear, taste our desperation. We didn't know that it was already hunting us, already choosing which of us it would wear next. We made camp at the base of the cliff, taking turns on watch with Tommy. I took the first watch, sitting with my back to the rock, staring up at the cave entrance while the others tried to sleep. None of them succeeded. I could hear them tossing, breathing, occasionally whimpering. Around midnight, I heard movement in the cave. Heavy, deliberate movement. Something climbing up the tunnel. I woke Tommy silently, putting my finger to my lips, and we both watched the entrance with our weapons ready, him with his rifle, me with the camp machete I kept for clearing brush. It emerged around 2 a.m. Or rather, something wearing Rebecca's skin emerged. It was worse than seeing the creature in its true form, because this looked like Rebecca, moved like Rebecca, but there was something wrong in a way that made my brain rebel against what my eyes were seeing. The proportions were subtly off, arms slightly too long, legs bent at the wrong angle. The face was Rebecca's, but the smile was too wide, and when it spoke, the voice was hers, but the words were twisted. "I found something interesting down there," it said in Rebecca's voice. "Want to see?" Tommy fired. The shot hit it in the chest, and Rebecca's body jerked backward. For a moment, I felt hope. But then it straightened up, and the wound in its chest. Her chest began to close, the flesh knitting together like it was being sewn with invisible thread. "That wasn't nice," it said, and then it laughed with Rebecca's laugh. "Your turn." It moved faster than I could follow. One moment it was at the cave entrance, 20 feet above us. The next it was beside James, who had woken to the gunshot and was scrambling to his feet. James had time to scream once. Then the thing wearing Rebecca's skin put her hand on his chest, and I saw its fingers sink into his flesh like his skin was wet clay. "Run," Tommy was screaming, pulling at my arm. "Alina, run." This time, we didn't hesitate. Sarah was already ahead of us, having woken at the gunshot. Marcus grabbed my other arm, and the four of us ran into the darkness of the canyon, leaving James's screams behind us. We ran until we couldn't run anymore, until our lungs were burning and our legs were numb. We found a narrow side canyon, barely 3 feet wide, and pressed ourselves into it, panting, listening. "It's still back there," Marcus whispered. "I can hear it, it's singing." He was right. Floating down the canyon came a sound that might have been singing, might have been weeping, might have been both at once. It was using James's voice now, I realized. It had already discarded Rebecca like an old coat. "We can't outrun it," I said when I had breath enough to speak. "It's faster than us. It's stronger. It can wear our faces, our voices. We have to go back. We have to finish the ritual." "4 of us," Sarah said, counting on her fingers. The painting showed 5. 1 to sacrifice, 4 to perform the rites. We need 5 and we only have 4. We have James, Marcus said quietly, if it hasn't. He's dead, I said. James is dead. Rebecca too, it's just us now. We huddled in that side canyon until dawn, taking turns keeping watch, waiting for the thing to find us. But it didn't come. When the sun finally rose, painting the canyon walls in shades of blood and fire, we crept back toward the cave. James was there at the base of the cliff. He was sitting against the rock, his eyes open, his mouth slack. "James," I called out, hope making my voice break. He didn't move, and as we got closer I saw why. He was empty. The thing had worn him like a suit and then discarded him and what was left. There was no blood, no wounds, just an empty husk, skin and bones with nothing inside. Sarah threw up. Marcus turned away, making sounds that weren't quite words. Even Tommy, with all his military training, looked like he might faint. "We need to move him," I said, my voice hard and strange in my own ears. "We need to check his remains, see if there's anything we can use." "Use?" Sarah shrieked. "Use? Alina, our friends are dead. That thing is wearing their bodies like costumes and you're talking about using them." "I'm talking about survival," I snapped. "I'm talking about making sure no one else has to die. Now help me." We searched James's body. I refused to call it anything else because whatever had made him James was gone. His notes were still in his pocket, waterlogged with someone else's blood. His camera was smashed, but his field journal was intact, and in it he had sketched the key panels of the binding ritual. We sat there in the shadow of the cave where two of our friends had died, and we studied those sketches like our lives depended on it. Because they did. The ritual required 5 participants, 1 to serve as the sacrifice whose death would power the binding, 4 to perform the rites, 2 to mark the circle, 1 to speak the words, 1 to seal the breach. "We're 4, Marcus said. One of us could volunteer." "Volunteer to die?" Tommy laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "That's not volunteering, that's murder." "What choice do we have?" Marcus shot back. "It'll kill us all anyway. At least this way 3 of us survive." "3 of us survive," I repeated, and the reality of those words settled over me like a shroud. "We came in 6. We'll leave 3 if we're lucky." We spent the morning planning. The ritual required specific timing: sunset, when the barrier between worlds was thin. It required specific materials: ash from a juniper fire, red ochre paint, obsidian blades. We had some of these things in our packs. Others we had to gather from the canyon, working in pairs, never straying more than sight distance from each other. The Skinwalker watched us. We never saw it directly, but we knew it was there. We heard it calling to us in Rebecca's voice, in James's voice, promising us safety, threatening us with pain, begging for help. Once we found Tommy's rifle leaning against a rock, even though Tommy had never let go of it. When he touched it, the metal was warm, like skin. By late afternoon, we were ready. We had what we needed, and as the sun began to sink toward the canyon rim, we made our way back to the cave of Whispering Bones. "Last chance," Tommy said as we stood at the entrance. "We don't have to do this. We could just run, try to make it to the truck before it finds us." "It'll find us," Sarah said. "It can wear our faces, remember. It could be waiting at the truck right now. Or it could be driving out to meet the rangers we sent for help. We have to end this here." "Then we need to decide," I said. "Who's the sacrifice?" No one spoke. The sun dipped lower, painting the canyon in long shadows. "I'll do it," Tommy said finally. "I'm the oldest. I've seen combat. I know what death looks like. Better me than you academics." "No," Marcus said. "It should be me. I translated the codex. I led us here. This is my responsibility." "Stop," Sarah said, and her voice was eerily calm. "There's a way to determine it. The codex mentioned it, a test. The sacrifice must be willing but also worthy. The ritual will reject a sacrifice made in despair or guilt. It must be made in—" "What was the word, Marcus?" "Love," Marcus whispered. "The sacrifice must be made in love. the greatest love for the others. Then we'll know, I said. When the time comes, we'll know who's willing to give their life for the others, truly willing. Not for guilt, not for responsibility, for love. We climbed back into the cave as the last light failed. The tunnel seemed longer on the second descent, as if the cave itself was stretching to keep us from reaching the ritual chamber. Our headlamps cut through the darkness like knives through black water, illuminating walls that seemed to sweat with something darker than moisture. The smell from the broken seal had intensified that copper-sweet scent of rotting flowers mixed with the chemical tang of fear itself. I was in the lead this time, Marcus behind me, then Sarah, with Tommy bringing up the rear. We moved in silence, each of us lost in our own private terror, each of us knowing that one of us would not leave this place alive. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered as we crawled through the narrow section. I stopped, holding my breath. There was a sound coming from up ahead, a wet, rhythmic sound like someone pulling meat from bone. It was quiet, almost gentle, as if whatever was making it was being careful not to wake someone sleeping nearby. "It's waiting for us," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. "It knows we're coming." "It wants us to come," Tommy added. "It could be out there hunting us right now, but it's staying here, in the dark, where it has the advantage." I forced myself to keep moving. The ritual would only work at sunset, when the barrier between worlds was thin. We had perhaps 40 minutes before the window closed, and if we missed it, we would be trapped in this cave with the Skinwalker until dawn. We emerged into the ritual chamber, and I immediately wished we hadn't. The chamber had changed. It was the same space, the same cathedral-like dimensions, the same painted walls, but it felt different. The air was heavier, charged with static electricity that made my hair stand on end. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees, and our breath misted in the beam of our headlamps. And in the center of the room, where the sealed pit had been, there was now a circle of bodies. Rebecca was there, or what was left of her. She had been arranged. Her limbs were positioned in a pattern that matched the first panel of the cave paintings, the panel showing the summoning ritual. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, and her mouth was frozen in a scream that never seemed to end. She was wearing her skin, but just barely. In places, it hung loose, as if it had been removed and then hastily replaced. James was beside her, similarly positioned. They were holding hands, I realized with sick horror. The Skinwalker had posed them like dolls, like children playing at being a family. "Oh God," Sarah choked. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." "Don't look at them," I commanded, my voice sounding harsh and strange. "They want us to look. They want us to mourn. We need to focus on the ritual, now." We spread out around the chamber, each of us taking a position. According to James's notes and the paintings on the wall, we needed to recreate the binding circle exactly as shown. 4 points around the pit, with the sacrifice in the center. "The materials," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Marcus, you have the ochre. Sarah, the ash. Tommy, the blades. I'll handle the circle." We worked in tense silence, marking out the binding circle on the stone floor using chalk and charcoal. The circle needed to be precise. The ancient artists had shown it as a band of specific symbols, each one connecting to the next in an unbroken chain. A single break in the chain would render the entire ritual useless. I was halfway through, marking the first symbol, when I heard it speak. "You're making a mistake," it said, and the voice was Tommy's voice coming from the darkness above us. I spun around, headlamp searching, but there was nothing there. "The ritual won't work with unwilling hearts, and none of you are willing to die. You're only willing to kill." "Ignore it," I said, my hands shaking as I drew the next symbol. "It's trying to confuse us. Keep working." "Alina," it said, using my name with Tommy's voice, "you know why I'm here. You know what the old ones summoned me for. I was their weapon, their protector. The world outside was dangerous, full of enemies and spirits who hated them. I kept those things away. I kept them safe." "Liar," Sarah spat. You're a monster, you kill, you wear people like clothes. I learn, it corrected, still using Tommy's voice. I wear them to understand them, to remember what it means to be human. It's been so long. When I wear them, I can feel again. I can remember the sun. I can remember love. Stop talking to it, I hissed. It's trying to delay us. The sun is setting. We have maybe 20 minutes. We worked faster, desperate now. I completed the circle of symbols, checking each one against James's sketches. Marcus prepared the ochre paste, mixing red pigment with water from our canteens. Sarah arranged the juniper ash in a pattern at cardinal points north, south, east, west. Tommy stood guard, his useless rifle shouldered, his eyes scanning the darkness where the ceiling vanished into shadow. 5 minutes, Marcus said, checking his watch. His hands were shaking so badly the ochre was smearing. We need to choose. Now, who's the sacrifice? We looked at each other. In the harsh light of our headlamps, we all looked like corpses already pale, sweating, eyes too wide, breathing too fast. It should be me, I said quietly. I'm the leader. I brought us here. I made the decision to investigate the codex. This is my responsibility. No, Sarah said, and her voice was calm now, resigned. You're the only one who can speak the words. The ritual needs someone to recite the binding. You're the linguist. You're the only one who can pronounce the symbols correctly. Then I should, Marcus began. You're the only one who can read the full ritual, I interrupted him. If something goes wrong, you need to be there to adapt. And I'm the only one strong enough to hold the circle if it breaks, Tommy said, understanding dawning in his eyes. It has to be me or Sarah. Sarah nodded slowly. I'm younger, I have less to lose, my parents are dead, I never married, no children. If someone has to die to save the others, it makes sense that it's me. No, Tommy said firmly. I told you I'm the oldest, I've lived my life. You have decades ahead of you, it should be me. The ritual requires willing sacrifice made in love, Sarah reminded him. Not resignation, not acceptance. Love, I love you all. I love that you trusted me to be here, that you valued my expertise, that you treated me like family. I've never had that before. If my death can save you, then that's the best thing I can do with my life. Sarah, I started, my voice breaking. It's decided, she said, and she walked to the center of the circle, positioning herself between the bodies of Rebecca and James. Her face was serene, almost beautiful in the lamplight. Don't mourn for me, just finish it. We had no time to argue. I could feel the sunset happening above us, could feel the pressure in the air changing as the day gave way to night. The barrier was thinning. Positions, I commanded, my tears streaming but my voice steady. Marcus, north point, Tommy, south, I'll take east. The ritual begins now. We took our places around the circle, each of us holding an obsidian blade. According to the paintings, we needed to cut ourselves at the moment of sacrifice, letting our blood mix with the ash and ochre to create a seal that would bind the Skinwalker back into its prison. The words, Marcus said. Elena, you need to begin. I looked at the symbols on the wall, the ones I had studied during our hasty preparation. They were in a language that predated the ancestral Pueblones, perhaps predated human civilization in this continent. But Marcus and I had worked out a phonetic approximation. I opened my mouth to speak, and the world exploded. It had been waiting. Of course it had been waiting. It had let us prepare, let us think we had a chance, just to crush that hope at the moment of greatest desperation. The ceiling rained down on us, not rock but something that moved like rock. The Skinwalker dropped into the center of our circle, landing in a crouch between us and Sarah. And this time, it wasn't wearing anyone's face. I had tried to describe it before, but I hadn't even glimpsed its true nature. This was what it was when it wasn't pretending to be human. It was tall, 7 feet at least, and its body was wrong in every possible way. 7 limbs, I counted, or maybe 9, because some of them seemed to shift and move, appearing and disappearing in the light of our headlamps. Its skin, If it was skin, was translucent, and I could see things moving underneath. Things that looked like organs but weren't arranged in any pattern that made sense. And its face. It had faces, dozens of them swirling under the surface of its skin like fish in a murky pond. I saw Rebecca's face slide past, then James's, then faces I didn't recognize, ancient faces, native faces, Spanish faces, faces from centuries ago. They all opened their mouths to scream, but the sound came from somewhere else, from the thing's real mouth, which was somewhere on its body where a mouth shouldn't be. "You thought you could bind me?" it asked, and its voice was all the voices at once, a chorus of the dead. "I have walked these lands for 10,000 years. I have worn the skins of kings and shamans and soldiers. I am older than your gods. You are less than ants to me." Now I screamed. We attacked. There was no thought, no plan, just survival instinct and desperation. Tommy swung his rifle like a club. Marcus threw his obsidian blade. I charged forward with the machete. It moved like liquid. Tommy's rifle passed through it, hitting nothing. The obsidian blade shattered against its skin, its not skin. And when I struck with the machete, it caught my wrist in a hand that felt like ice and fire combined. "You first," it said, and its face shifted, becoming Elena Vargas. It was wearing my face now, my skin, and looking at it was like looking into a mirror that showed my death. "I'll save the willing one for last. I want to taste her love before I wear her." It threw me. I flew across the chamber, hitting the wall with a force that drove the wind from my lungs and made my vision swim with stars. I heard Marcus scream, heard Sarah crying out, heard Tommy bellowing in rage. Then I heard the first death. It was Marcus. The Skinwalker caught him as he tried to rush to my aid, and it did something I still can't fully process. It put its hands on his head and it pulled. Not his head, himself. I saw his eyes go wide, saw his mouth open in a scream that had no sound, and then I saw the light go out. Not his life, something else. Something essential. His soul, maybe. Whatever makes us human. The Skinwalker wore him instantly, the new skin settling over its form like a cloak. It turned to us with Marcus's face, his eyes, but with something behind them that was ancient and hungry and utterly inhuman. "He was angry," it said in Marcus's voice. "So much anger. About his parents, about his failed marriage, about his career. I can use that. Anger tastes better than fear." Tommy had his knife out now, a combat blade that looked pitiful against what we faced. He was circling, trying to get to where Sarah still crouched in the center of the circle, trying to protect her. "It has to be one of us," Sarah was saying over and over, her mantra of sacrifice. "It has to be willing. It has to be love." "Sarah, run," I croaked, trying to stand, my ribs screaming with every breath. But she didn't run. She stood up, walked toward the Skinwalker wearing Marcus's skin, and she smiled. "I offer myself," she said, clear and strong, "willingly, in love for them." The Skinwalker paused. For the first time I saw hesitation. "You would give yourself to me, freely?" "To save them, yes." "Sarah, no." Tommy and I screamed together, but it was too late. She had planned it, I realized later. While we were arguing about who would sacrifice themselves, she had been planning. The obsidian blade she had hidden in her sleeve. The position she had chosen in the center of the circle. The words she had spoken. "The ritual requires willing sacrifice," she said, still walking toward it. "But it doesn't say the sacrifice has to be killed by the Skinwalker, only that they must die." She raised the blade and drew it across her throat in one swift, sure motion. Blood sprayed across the Skinwalker, across Marcus, and it screamed. Not in triumph, but in agony. The blood where it touched seemed to burn, smoke rising from its borrowed skin, and I understood. The ritual, her willing death, her willing sacrifice, made in love, it was completing the circle even as she fell. "Now," she gasped, blood bubbling at her lips. "Elena, Tommy, now the words complete the seal." I dragged myself upright, every bone in my body screaming. Tommy was beside me in an instant, his hand finding mine, gripping tight. "The words," he shouted. "Say the words." I opened my mouth and let the ancient language pour out. I didn't know if I was pronouncing it right. I didn't know if the sounds I was making were even human. But the symbols on the walls began to glow, just faintly, just enough to see in the darkness. "The circle," Tommy yelled. We moved together, completing the binding chain, stepping over Sarah's body, over the spreading pool of her blood. The Skinwalker, wearing Marcus now, was thrashing, trapped in the center of the chamber, caught between the sacrifice and the ceiling. "You can't," it screamed in Marcus's voice. "I am eternal, I am." "You are bound," I screamed back, finishing the words. "By blood willingly given, by love stronger than fear, return to your prison, wear no more skins, speak no more lies, back, back, back." And it worked, or something worked. The floor opened, the stone parting like water, and the pit showed itself again. The Skinwalker tried to flee, tried to run up the walls, but Sarah's blood held it, red chains that it couldn't break. It slid backward, screaming, thrashing, reaching for us with Marcus's hands. "I'll remember you," it promised as it fell. "I'll remember your names. I'll remember your faces. When I wake again, and I will wake again, I'll find your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. I'll wear them all one by one until your lines are extinct and forgotten." Then the seal returned. Not the organic seal we had broken, but something new. The stone flowed over the pit, smooth and seamless, and the symbols on the floor glowed once, twice, then faded to darkness. Silence. We stood there, Tommy and I, in the blood of our friends, surrounded by the bodies of those we had failed to save. "It's done," Tommy whispered. "Elena, it's done." "Is it?" I asked, my voice hollow. Because I had heard what the Skinwalker said, "When I wake again, not if, when." We gathered what we could, our packs, James's notes, the few valuables our friends had carried. We couldn't move the bodies. The cave wouldn't let us. Every time we tried to lift Rebecca or James or Marcus, the stone seemed to clutch at them, and a sound came from the sealed pit that promised pain beyond death. Sarah we carried. She was light, so light, and her blood was still warm. We left the cave at midnight, stumbling through the tunnels with only one headlamp between us. Tommy's had broken in the fight, and mine was flickering, dying. We emerged into a canyon flooded with moonlight, the stars cold and distant above us. We didn't speak on the hike back to the truck. We couldn't. What words could encompass what we had lost, what we had done, what we had survived? We reached the vehicle at dawn, exhausted beyond measure, broken in ways that would never heal. Tommy drove. I don't remember the trip back to Moab. I remember only fragments: the smell of gasoline, the hum of the engine, the way the morning light seemed too bright, too harsh. We knew what we had to do. We had discussed it in hushed voices during the drive. There would be no truthful report, no admission of what we had found, what we had released, what we had seen. The truth would destroy us, destroy our careers, our lives, our sanity. No one would believe us. They would think we had murdered our friends or lost them to accident or succumbed to some shared psychosis. But we also knew we couldn't just let them vanish. We owed them that much, owed them to be acknowledged, to be mourned, to be searched for. We reported them missing to the park rangers in Moab. 3 members of our team, we said, lost during an unauthorized excavation in the Maze district. We showed them our permits, told them about the cave we had found, gave them coordinates that were deliberately vague. The search lasted 3 days. They found the cave eventually, guided by our approximate directions. They found the chamber, the paintings, the sealed pit. But our friends' bodies were gone. The stone floor was clean. There was no blood, no trace, no evidence that 6 people had ever entered that place. "The bodies must have been moved," the lead ranger told us, his eyes suspicious. "By animals, or by someone else who found the cave. You're sure this is where you left them?" We were sure, but we were also sure that the cave had hidden them, swallowed them, made them part of itself. The Skinwalker might be bound, but the cave was still hungry. It had taken our friends as offerings, and it wasn't giving them back. The official report was filed quietly. 6 historians entered a restricted area without proper authorization. 3 returned, claiming supernatural occurrences. 3 remained missing, presumed dead from exposure, falling, or animal attack. No evidence of foul play. Case closed. We went our separate ways after that. Tommy took a position at a small college in Oregon, studying rocks, avoiding people. I returned to Colorado, tried to resume my teaching, tried to pretend that I hadn't seen what I saw, hadn't done what I did. For months I convinced myself it was over. The Skinwalker was bound. Our friends were dead, but their sacrifice had saved us. The story had ended. I was wrong. For the first 6 months after the cave, I tried to rebuild. I told myself that trauma could be managed, that horror could be processed, that eventually the memories would fade into something I could live with. I threw myself into my work, published 3 papers on unrelated topics, accepted a tenure position, even began therapy with a psychiatrist who specialized in PTSD. Dr. Jennifer Morrison was her name. Kind, patient, intelligent. She listened to my edited version of the events, the version where my friends died in a cave collapse, where I survived through luck rather than ritual, where there was no Skinwalker, no ancient evil, no willing sacrifice made in blood and love. "You're experiencing survivor's guilt," she told me in one session, 6 months after the cave. "It's common in situations where multiple people die and one survives. You feel responsible because you led the expedition. But you need to understand cave collapses are unpredictable. You couldn't have known. You couldn't have stopped it." I wanted to believe her. I tried to believe her. But every night I woke screaming from dreams where I was still in that chamber, where the Skinwalker wore my face as it wore others, where I watched myself kill my friends while trapped behind my own eyes, unable to stop, unable to look away. Tommy and I spoke rarely. A phone call on the anniversary of the cave, an email at Christmas. He was worse than I was, I think. He had seen combat before the cave, had told me once about the things he had done in the name of duty, the lives he had taken. But he had never seen anything like the Skinwalker. "It's wearing them, Alina," he told me in our last phone call 3 months ago. "I can feel it. It's still wearing them. Even bound, it's wearing their faces, remembering their lives. It hasn't forgotten us." "Stop," I had said. "We sealed it. It's over." "Is it?" he asked, and then the line went dead. I should have called back. I should have driven to Oregon to check on him. But I was selfish, absorbed in my own recovery, my own attempts to forget. I told myself he was coping in his own way, that the distance was necessary for us both. I was wrong. The call came last Tuesday, exactly 6 months after our conversation. It was the police in Portland, Oregon. They had found Tommy's apartment empty, his belongings undisturbed. His bed was made, his dishes washed. But his laptop was on, screen still glowing, and on the screen was a Word document with a single sentence. "It's not wearing their skin anymore. It's just wearing mine." They found traces of blood in his apartment, they told me. Not much, a few drops in the bathroom, a smear on the front door. But no body, no signs of struggle, no evidence of forced entry or exit. Thomas Blackwood, 47 years old, former Army Ranger, survival expert, had simply vanished from his locked apartment in the middle of the night. "Do you know of anyone who might have wanted to harm him?" the detective asked. "Any enemies? Any recent changes in behavior?" I told them about the cave. I couldn't help myself. I told them everything: the Cartwright Codex, the Skinwalker, the ritual, the sacrifice. I told them about Rebecca and James, about Marcus and Sarah, about the thing we had bound in the depths of the earth. They thanked me politely. They took notes. I could see them exchanging glances, could see the concern in their eyes, concern for my sanity, not for Tommy's safety. They thought I was experiencing a psychotic break, that the trauma of my friends' deaths had finally overwhelmed me. Maybe they're right. Maybe I've lost my mind. Maybe Tommy simply moved away, changed his identity, started a new life. Maybe the blood was from a nosebleed, a cut while shaving. Maybe I'm imagining connections where none exist. But I know what I saw in that cave. I know what Sarah gave her life to stop. And I know that the Skinwalker made a promise before it was sealed away. When I wake again, and I will wake again, I'll find your children, your grandchildren. I'll wear them all one by one until your lines are extinct and forgotten. But we don't have children. None of us were parents, so it would have to settle for something else. It would have to settle for us. I went to Oregon immediately after the call. I needed to see Tommy's apartment. I needed to understand. The police had left it sealed but unguarded, a low-priority missing persons case. No signs of foul play, probably voluntary disappearance. They gave me the key when I showed them my identification, my professional credentials, my lies about being Tommy's emergency contact. The apartment smelled wrong. Not wrong like a crime scene, wrong like a cave, like copper and rotting flowers and the chemical tang of fear. The smell hit me as soon as I opened the door, and I knew. I knew before I found the journal, before I read his final entries, before I understood what had happened. Tommy had been keeping track of his symptoms. The journal was on his nightstand, a leather-bound book filled with dates and observations. I sat on his bed, the bed where he had last slept, where it had found him, and I read. The first entries were normal enough. Reports of nightmares, insomnia, the usual aftermath of trauma. But then, about 3 months after the cave, the entries changed. October 15th, saw Rebecca today on the bus. She was wearing her field jacket, the blue one. She smiled at me. I got off at the next stop and vomited in an alley. When I looked back, she was gone. October 22nd, Marcus contacted me. Email from his account. It said, "I miss the desert, I miss the warmth, come visit me in the dark." The email was sent 3 days ago at 2:47 a.m. I checked the account activity. The login came from Moab, Utah, near the park. November 3rd, found James sitting in my living room when I came home. He was reading my book on Mesolithic tool use. He looked up and said, "You've lost weight, Tom. I can feel your bones so clearly through this skin." When I turned on the lights, he was gone, but the chair was warm and there was red clay on the carpet. November 17th, I understand now, it wasn't sealed completely. Sarah's sacrifice bound the body but not the essence. It can extend, project. It can wear their faces without their bodies. It's been watching us, Alina. Every day, everywhere we go. It's wearing them like masks to remind us of what we did, of what we cost. November 30th, I can't sleep anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. Not in the cave here, in my apartment, in my dreams. It's learning me, Alina. I can feel it studying my memories, my mannerisms, my voice. It's practicing. Soon it won't need to wear the others anymore. It'll be able to wear me. December 3rd, it spoke to me last night. Through the wall, it said, "Your sacrifice was refused. Love, but not enough love. Sarah's death was enough to bind my body, but my spirit was never imprisoned. I gave you 6 months. 6 months to live with your guilt, your grief. Now I come to collect." The last entry was dated 4 days before his disappearance. December 14th, it's wearing my face now. I can see it. In the mirror behind me, it's practicing my expressions. When I smile, it smiles. When I frown, it frowns. But the eyes are wrong. The eyes are always wrong. Tomorrow it will step out of the mirror and into my life. Tomorrow I will become the mask. Tell Alina I'm sorry. Tell her I should have run that night. Tell her to run now. I put down the journal, my hands shaking. The apartment had grown cold, impossibly cold for December in Oregon. My breath misted in the air. "Tommy," I called out, my voice cracking. Silence. Then from the bathroom I heard water running. I should have left. I should have run, called the police, never looked back. But I had to know, I had to see. I walked to the bathroom door. It was closed, the water stopped, and then the door opened. The thing standing there was Tommy. Exactly Tommy in every detail: his height, his build, his face, his clothes. He was wearing the flannel shirt I had seen him in at the cave, the one with the hole in the elbow. He was wearing his hair the way Tommy wore it, slightly too long, silver at the temples. "Alina," it said, and it was Tommy's voice. "You came." "You're not Tommy," I whispered. "I am now," it said, and smiled Tommy's smile. "I've been practicing, see." It moved like Tommy, the slight limp from his old combat injury, the way he held his shoulders, the rhythm of his breathing. It was perfect. It was terrifying in its perfection. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Gone," it said. "Worn, used. He's in here with me now along with the others. They keep me company in the dark. They tell me stories. Did you know Tommy once killed a man with his bare hands, in Afghanistan, a boy really? No more than 16, he never told anyone. Keep that secret locked in his heart for 30 years. But he told me. We tell each other everything now. We're very close." "You promised," I said, backing away. "You said 6 months. You promised to leave us alone." "I promised to find your children," it corrected, stepping out of the bathroom following my retreat. "But you have no children, so I had to reinterpret the terms. I promised to wear them all one by one. That includes you, Alina. That has always included you. You're the last, the leader, the one who brought them to me. I'm saving you for last." "Why?" I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. "Why toy with us? Why wait? You could have killed us in the cave. You could have killed us any time." "Because that's not how I hunt," it said, and its voice shifted, became less Tommy, more itself. "I don't hunt prey. I don't hunt enemies. I hunt family, the ones who belong to me, the ones who share my space, my time, my darkness. You stood in my chamber. You spoke my name. You shed blood on my floor. You're mine now, Alina. You all were mine from the moment you entered the cave. I was just waiting for the right moment to collect you." It moved toward me, and I could see Tommy's face beginning to change, beginning to slip. Underneath, I glimpsed the thing it really was: the too many limbs, the wrong-jointed fingers, the faces swirling under the skin. "Rebecca was first," it said. "Because she broke the seal, she freed me. She deserved to be first. James was next. He tried to be brave. He tried to save her. His anger was delicious. Marcus was third. He thought he could bind me with words. He thought language had power. He was right about the power, but wrong about whose side it was on. Sarah cheated me. Her sacrifice bound my body, locked me back in the stone. But she didn't know about the other rituals, the other ways to wear skin, the ways that don't require flesh at all. I've been practicing those rituals for 6 months, learning to wear you like you wear your clothes, like you wear your memories, your grief, your guilt." And Tommy just gave up. He stopped fighting. He accepted me. That made him easy to put on. I had backed into the living room, had nowhere else to go. The apartment door was behind me, but I knew it wouldn't help. The Skinwalker could move through walls, through shadows, through the spaces between seconds. "You're lying," I said, grasping for anything. "The ritual worked. We sealed you. You're still bound." "The ritual worked on my body," it agreed, still advancing. "My physical form sleeps in the cave beneath the stone, dreaming of freedom. But I am more than flesh, Alina. I am idea. I am story. I am the thing that waits in the dark and wears your face. You cannot seal an idea. You cannot bind a story. You can only postpone it." "Then why the cave?" I demanded. "Why wear their skins? Why torture us? Why any of this?" It stopped, Tommy's face becoming more itself again, more human in its imitation. "Because you interrupted my sleep," it said, and for the first time I heard anger, real anger. 300 years I rested undisturbed. The native people knew better than to enter my cave. They knew to leave offerings at the entrance, to seal the paths, to forget. But you came. You broke the seal. You woke me. And then you had the audacity to try to seal me again, to sacrifice one of your own and send me back to sleep. Do you know what it's like to be bound, Alina? To be trapped in stone, in darkness, with only your thoughts for company. To feel time passing like water dripping on your face, each drop an eternity, each drop a reminder that you are nothing but a memory. Sarah's sacrifice bought you 6 months of my patience. 6 months where I waited in the dark, nursing my anger, planning my revenge. Do you understand now? I don't want to kill you. I want to become you. I want to wear your skin to your lectures, teach your students, publish your papers, live your life. And when I grow tired of that skin, when I've used up everything that makes you interesting, I'll discard you like I discarded the others. And then I'll move on to the next. And the next. Forever. It reached for me, and I saw Tommy's fingers lengthening, the joints bending wrong, the nails becoming claws. But first, it whispered, I want you to understand what you've done. I want you to carry that understanding into the dark with you. You didn't just wake me, you fed me. You gave me 3, now 4 fresh skins to wear. You renewed my hunger. And when I've worn you all, when your lines are truly extinct, I'll sleep again. But I'll sleep deeper, fuller, stronger. And when the next curious human finds my cave, breaks my seal, wakes my rest, I'll be ready. I'll be so very ready. I did the only thing I could do. I turned and ran. The apartment door opened before I touched it. I think it let me go, wanted me to run, wanted the chase. I sprinted down the hallway, down the stairs, out into the cold December night. The streets were empty, the city asleep. My car was parked 3 blocks away, and I ran for it, lungs burning, heart hammering. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I knew what I would see, Tommy's face in the window, watching me run. Or worse, my own face, smiling because it knew I couldn't escape. I made it to my car, fumbled with the keys, got the door open. As I started the engine, I finally looked back. The apartment building was dark, silent. No figure in the window, no pursuit. But on the windshield of my car, written in something that might have been frost or might have been something else, were 3 words. Not done yet. I drove all night, didn't stop, didn't dare. I drove until I reached my apartment in Boulder, locked every door, covered every mirror, and sat in the dark with a kitchen knife in my hand until morning. That was 3 days ago. Since then I have seen them, all of them, Rebecca on the street corner, James in the coffee shop, Marcus at the library, Tommy in the crowd at the grocery store. They're watching me, following me. Never close enough to touch, never far enough to ignore. And yesterday I received a package. No return address, no postage marks, just sitting on my doormat when I came home from a lecture. Inside was a photograph, a selfie taken in a dark place, illuminated by the camera flash. 5 people standing close together, arms around each other, smiling at the lens. Rebecca, James, Marcus, Sarah, and Tommy. All wearing my face. On the back, in my own handwriting, or the Skinwalker's perfect imitation of it, were the words, "Your turn soon." I am writing this from a motel room in rural Utah, 30 miles from the nearest town, 50 miles from the nearest police station, 100 miles from anyone who might believe what I have to say. The curtains are drawn, the mirrors are covered with bedsheets, and I have placed salt across every threshold, an ancient protection I don't really believe in but can't afford to ignore. It has been 4 days since the photograph arrived. 4 days of seeing my own face on strangers in crowds, of hearing my voice calling to me from empty rooms, of feeling eyes on me that I can't see, watching, waiting, patient as stone. I know what it wants. It wants me to break, to run back to the cave, to try to seal it again, to sacrifice myself as Sarah did. It wants me to believe that if I give up my life willingly, I can save myself from being worn. But I think it's lying. I think the ritual is a trap, a way to make us cooperate in our own consumption. Sarah's sacrifice didn't seal it. It just made it angry, gave it reason to hunt us one by one, to punish us for daring to resist. There must be another way. There has to be another way. I have spent the last 3 days researching. Not in libraries, not in databases. Those are too easy to track. I have been driving, following the old roads, visiting the places where indigenous people still remember the old ways. I have spoken to Navajo elders in hushed voices, to Hopi medicine men who eyed me with suspicion, to Ute historians who refused to speak in English. They all know about the Skinwalker. They all know about caves like the one we found. And they all tell the same story, once worn, never free. The only way to escape a Skinwalker is to never let it wear you. Once it has your face, your voice, your mannerisms, it can find you anywhere. It can become you anywhere. But I found something else in the fragments of conversation, in the hints of older stories. A way to fight back. Not to seal its sealing doesn't work, not truly, but to deny it. The Skinwalker feeds on identity. It doesn't just wear your skin, it consumes who you are. Your memories, your relationships, your essence. It hollows you out and wears what's left like a suit. But what if there's nothing left to wear? What if you become so un-you that the Skinwalker has no purchase? It's dangerous. It might be suicide in a different form, but it's the only chance I have. Tonight I go back to the cave. I don't know why I'm writing this. No one will believe it. No one will publish it. But if you're reading this, if you found this after I'm gone, don't go to the cave. Don't look for the devils. Don't break seals that ancient people worked hard to create. Some things should stay buried. Some things should stay forgotten. Some things are buried because they want to be found. I arrived at the Canyonlands boundary after midnight. The park was closed, the gates locked, but I knew the old ranger roads, the unofficial tracks that locals used for access. I parked my car in a dry wash, covered it with brush, and began the long hike into the Maze District. I wasn't alone. I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel it watching from the cliffs, wearing faces I knew, waiting for me to reach my destination. It wanted me to come here. It had always wanted me to come here. The hike took 6 hours. By the time I reached the Crescent Canyon, dawn was breaking, painting the red walls in shades of blood and fire. The cave entrance was exactly as I remembered it, the petroglyphs still there, still watching. The smell was stronger now, the scent of copper and flowers almost overwhelming. I didn't hesitate. I had come too far, lost too much, to turn back now. I climbed to the entrance and entered the cave of Whispering Bones. The tunnel seemed shorter this time, as if the cave was eager to receive me. I emerged into the ritual chamber to find it changed once again. They were all there, Rebecca, James, Marcus, Sarah, Tommy, standing in a circle around the sealed pit, holding hands, their faces turned toward me with expressions of welcome, anticipation. "Elena," they said together, their voices blending into one chorus, "you came home." "You're not them," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know you're not them." "We're not," they admitted in perfect unison. "And we are. We're what they became, what you will become. Come join us, Elena. It's not so bad. We remember being human. We remember loving you. We can still feel it in here. We want you to feel it too." They opened their mouths, all 5 of them, and from their throats came the sound of the Skinwalker's voice, wet, grinding, inhuman. "Your plan won't work, little historian. You think you can erase yourself. You think you can become nothing and I won't be able to wear you. I don't need you to be someone. I just need you to be skin. Empty skin works as well as full skin. Better, even, easier to wear." I reached into my pack and pulled out the items I had gathered. A bundle of white sage from a Navajo elder, a vial of water from a sacred spring, a stone knife made of obsidian from a volcanic valley, and a photograph. Not the photograph they had sent me, a different photograph. The real 5 of us standing together at the trailhead before we entered the cave, before everything changed. Rebecca smiling, James squinting in the sun, Marcus laughing at a joke, Sarah looking serious, Tommy checking his equipment. And me in the center, the leader, the one who brought them here. "I remember who they were," I said, holding up the photograph. "I remember who I was, and I'm not going to let you take that." I had planned to destroy the Skinwalker's power by destroying my own identity, But that was its trap, its trick. The real way to fight it was the opposite, to remember so completely, so thoroughly, that there was no room for it to insert itself. To hold on to my friends as they truly were, not as the masks the Skinwalker wore. Rebecca was brave, I said, my voice firm. She made a mistake, but she was brave. She wanted to prove herself. She wanted to be part of something important. She wasn't just a victim. She was a scholar. She was a person. The thing wearing Rebecca's face flinched. James was kind, I continued. He took care of us. He mapped the way out when we were lost. He was the first to suggest we run, not because he was cowardly, but because he wanted to protect us. James's face twisted. Marcus was brilliant, I said. He translated languages no one else could read. He decoded the impossible. He gave his life trying to give us the tools to survive. He died saving us. Marcus's face began to slide, the features losing definition. Sarah was the best of us, I said, my voice cracking. She gave everything, her life, her future. She died showing us what love really means. She showed us that sacrifice isn't about dying, it's about choosing what's more important than your own survival. Sarah's face collapsed in on itself, becoming formless. And Tommy, I whispered. Tommy survived. He carried us out, he kept us safe. He was a soldier, a protector, a friend. He didn't deserve to be worn like a shirt. He deserved to live. He deserved to be remembered. Tommy's body, Tommy's form, began to shake, began to unravel. You think names matter, the Skinwalker screamed, its true voice emerging from all 5 bodies at once. You think memories can stop me. I am older than memory. I am older than names. Maybe, I said, but you're not older than love, and you can't wear what won't forget. I took the obsidian blade and drew it across my palm. Pain flared, bright and hot, and blood welled up in a line of crimson. I bind you, I said, pressing my bleeding palm to the floor. Not with sacrifice, not with death, with memory, with love, with the truth of who we were. The cave began to shake. Not the violent shaking of collapse, but something deeper, something older. The paintings on the walls began to glow, the symbols activating, responding to the blood. This isn't the ritual, the Skinwalker shrieked. This isn't how it's done. You don't know the words, you don't know the symbols. I know the truth, I said. I know what Sarah really gave us, not just her death, not just her sacrifice. She gave us time, time to remember, time to fight back, time to choose differently. The 5 bodies collapsed, melting into puddles of something dark and wrong. The Skinwalker's true form emerged from behind them, rising up to the ceiling, filling the chamber with its impossible presence. I will wear you, it promised. I will wear you slowly. Each scream will be a lesson. Each death will be an education. You will teach me everything I need to know about pain. No, I said, you won't, because I'm leaving, and I'm taking them with me. I reached out, not with my hands, but with my memory, my love, my refusal to let the Skinwalker define what my friends had been. And something answered. Something reached back. For a moment I saw them, the real them. Rebecca, James, Marcus, Sarah, Tommy, not as they were in death, but as they were in life. Smiling, waving, whole and human and free. Thank you, Alina, Sarah whispered. Thank you for remembering. Then they were gone, and the Skinwalker was screaming, and the cave was collapsing, and I was running. I don't remember the trip out of the cave. I remember only fragments, stone falling, the smell of blood, the Skinwalker's voice following me, promising, threatening. I remember emerging into sunlight, crawling to the cliff edge, climbing down somehow. I remember the hike back to my car, the drive out of the park, the hours spent at a gas station, shaking, vomiting, washing blood from my clothes that I didn't remember bleeding. I remember going to the ranger station, filing the report, 3 missing persons, my friends lost in the cave, lost to the elements, probably dead. They found the cave, they found the sealed pit, They found the paintings, the symbols, the evidence of ancient habitation. They found no bodies, no blood, no sign that anyone had died there at all. The official report was filed quietly. 6 historians entered a restricted area. 3 returned with improbable stories. 3 missing, presumed dead from exposure or wildlife or accident. The cave was sealed by the Park Service. The area was restricted. The case was closed. And I tried to believe it was over. That was a week ago. Yesterday I received a phone call. It was from the Portland police. They had found something in Tommy's apartment that they hadn't noticed before. A journal hidden in a loose floorboard. The journal detailed everything: the cave, the ritual, the deaths, and what came after. Dr. Vargas, the detective said, his voice carefully neutral, in this journal, Mr. Blackwood claims that you and he were the only survivors of some kind of supernatural event. He claims that a creature killed your friends. He says it's still hunting you. He says it's wearing his face. I was silent for a long moment. What do you think, detective? I think he was experiencing severe trauma, the detective said. I think you both were. And I think whatever happened in that cave was terrible enough that your minds created explanations that helped you survive it. But I also think that 3 people are dead and 2 are missing, and there's a lot about this case that doesn't add up. What do you mean, 2 missing? Marcus Chen, Dr. Vargas, your colleague. He was listed as one of the deceased in your initial report, but we checked the remains found in the cave. There were no remains, no trace of him at all. My blood ran cold. Marcus is dead. He died in the cave. I saw him die. I believe you believe that, doctor, but we just received a missing persons report from Santa Fe. Marcus Chen hasn't been seen at his home in 3 days. His apartment is locked. His phone is off. His car is still in the garage. And according to his employer, he called in sick 3 days ago, using his own voice. They've spoken to him. They insist it was him. I hung up the phone. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Marcus was alive, or something wearing Marcus was alive, and it had been walking around for 3 days, going to work, making phone calls, living his life, while I thought he was dead. Had he ever died? Had any of them died? Or had the Skinwalker simply borrowed them and returned them when it was done? I thought of the bodies in the cave, arranged like dolls. I thought of the empty husks, the hollowed skin, the way James had looked sitting against that rock. Had those been my friends, truly dead, or had they been costumes, discarded clothes? I thought of Tommy's journal. It's wearing my face now. I can see it in the mirror behind me. I thought of the photograph, 5 people all wearing my face. And I understood finally what the Skinwalker had been doing. It hadn't been killing them, not exactly. It had been trying them on, testing the fit, learning to move in their skin, and when it was done it could simply take them off, return them to their lives, new, changed, hollow. Marcus was out there now. Marcus, or something wearing Marcus. And Tommy. Was Tommy really missing, or was he walking around somewhere, wearing himself like an ill-fitting suit? I covered my mirrors. I unplugged my phones. I drove to this motel in the middle of nowhere and I wrote this account. I don't know if the Skinwalker is sealed. I don't know if my ritual worked, if my memories truly bound it, if I bought us time or just delayed the inevitable. I know that I'm the last of the 6, the last of the team, the last one who knows the truth. And I know that tonight I'll look in the mirror, because I have to know. I have to see if it's there, behind my eyes, wearing my face, waiting for the right moment to step out and become me. The detective asked me one last question before I hung up. He asked me about the cave, about the seal, about whether I thought the Skinwalker was truly bound. I told him yes. I told him we had performed the ritual, sacrificed our friend, sealed the creature away. I told him it was over. But I was lying, or maybe I was lying to myself. Because last night I woke up to scratching at the window. I didn't look, I was too afraid, but I heard a voice, my voice, calling my name, asking me to let it in. I'm cold, Alina. I need to come home, please, I'm so cold. I didn't answer, I didn't move. I lay there until dawn, shaking, listening. This morning, I found footprints outside the window. My footprints, leading from the window to the door and from the door back to the window. As if I had been outside, walking in circles, while I thought I was asleep inside. Or as if something wearing me had been trying to find a way in. I'm going to end this now. I'm going to leave this document where it can be found. I'm going to drive back to the cave and I'm going to face whatever is waiting there. If I'm lucky, I'll find the seal intact, the Skinwalker bound, my friends truly at rest. If I'm not lucky, well, you'll know. You'll know because I'll stop writing. And someone else will find this and they'll go looking for me and they'll find the cave and the story will start again. That's what it wants, I think. That's what it's always wanted. Not to kill, not to consume, but to continue, to be found, to be remembered. The Skinwalker is a story, a very old story, and stories want to be told. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I'm sorry, James. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry, Tommy. I'm sorry I brought you to that place. I'm sorry I believed in things I should have feared. I'm sorry I thought knowledge was worth any price. I'm sorry I survived when you didn't. Or did I survive? That's the question, isn't it? That's the mystery. Am I Alina Vargas, or am I something wearing her skin? There are tests, ways to know, but I'm afraid to take them, afraid of what I'll find. So I'll end here, with uncertainty, with doubt, with the possibility that everything I remember, everything I believe, everything I am, is just a costume, a mask, a story being told by something very old and very hungry and very, very patient. If you're reading this, in whatever future comes, remember. Don't go to the cave. Don't break the seal. Don't let it wear you. But most of all, don't trust the faces you know, not even your own, because the Skinwalker is real, it's ancient, and it's still hunting. I can hear it now, outside, scratching at the door. It sounds like me. It's using my voice. It's saying, let me in, I'm so cold, let me come home. I won't answer, I won't look. But I'm opening the door. Because I think maybe I already did. I think I opened it a long time ago. I think I let it in the moment I decided to find the cave. I think I've been wearing it all along. And now, finally, it's time to take me off. The end. Editor's note. This document was found in a motel room in rural Utah on December 19, 2019. The room showed signs of a struggle, but no body was recovered. Dr. Alina Vargas remains missing. The other members of her team, Rebecca Torres, James Holloway, Sarah Whitman, Thomas Blackwood, and Marcus Chen, are all officially listed as missing persons. Their cases remain open. If you are reading this and you hear scratching at your window or someone calling your name in your own voice, do not answer, do not look, and whatever you do, do not let it in.